In 1860, the world's first underground railway, the Metropolitan Railway, was designed to link 3 of London's main line terminals with the city. The track was laid mostly in a shallow cutting excavated along the street, which was then roofed over. This method was known as cut and cover construction. The first section of the Metropolitan opened from Paddington to Farringdon on 10th of January, 1863.
What are you talking about?
Well, so the Metropolitan line was the first underground railway.
You thought we were talking about?
Well, that's what you said. You said I was going to do the research
subway systems?
Yeah, subterranean railway cars.
I said underground railroad.
Riley Bowen thought he had his whole life on track, but he's about to find out that sometimes the tracks run underground. Sometimes the path to freedom starts with the first step. Riley Bowen, Patrick Wall.
They got away!
And introducing producer Drew.
No, I'm good.
Delete Everything presents the Underground Railroad. Aim high, swing low. Coming this summer.
What? Yo, I don't want a yay.
Dude, that is going to make so much money for somebody.
Oh, boy.
Smash hit of the summer.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Delete Everything Podcast. It's me and Riley's little safe house, little station out of the way where you can stop and be safe from all the...
Get some supplies, have a rest on the long weary road.
You can get some deleted, forgotten
histories,
partial histories while you're there before you move it on to north of the border. Thank you guys, everybody who's given us any reviews and any ratings, any comments, etc. We appreciate you guys so much. And for those of you who have not yet, get on it, man. We're waiting on you. If you want to make us some happy ass boys, that's the way to do it.
Happy ass boys.
Happy ass boys. That's
and a happy ass boys.
That's in the Patreon. That's in the Patreon we just recorded.
Yeah.
Happy ass boys. We've said it before. That is the way that you will boost us from the business end of things. So we're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep giving you stuff, and the best way that you can sort of pay us back for that is to just leave a rating, leave a review, leave a comment on Spotify, and if you want to say what's up to us, or if you want to give us any show suggestions, things of that nature, you can send us a message on deleteeverythingpodcast@gmail.com, and we will respond to you. We'll send a message right back. I guess in the same
tone, in the same internet. We'll send a message back in the same
internets
email process that you did.
No, the same tone in which it was sent, we will respond in like. So,
the same intent with which it is delivered, it shall be received.
So, we've also got some social media, and we've got some other ways that you can support Delete Everything Podcast, and we're going to give all that to you at the end of the show. So, with that being said, are you ready to run away, slip off into the night?
What? No, I'm hosting a podcast. I don't have time for slipping off into the night, madman. But hey, guys, we're doing a Riley episode today. This is a two-parter, and it's definitely the heaviest topic that I've researched myself. We had some heavy moments with a couple of the other episodes that I've researched independently. Like, I think specifically, the Freaks, the Freak Show episode had like a really heavy moment, and then there's another one and something else that was pretty good. What?
Are you just forgetting about the ones that I heavily researched?
We're talking about Riley episodes.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize
Patrick does there's heavy moments all over the place. We talk about genocides and shit. It's crazy.
I thought you were just saying in the history of the podcast. Everybody
knows that you're a big dick daddy researcher in these parts.
No, that's not what I said. I was just making sure that like,
It's fine.
Get what's coming to me.
It's fine.
I don't know. I actually, you know what? I don't want what's coming to me after hearing that intro.
Hey,
please don't give me what's coming to me.
Please, everybody, take that as a very tongue-in-cheek, very, very, like low grade, like poking fun. Is the
My asshole is so tight on this episode for fear of just. There's not even saying the wrong thing, just
this is
interpretation.
Definitely
being
the heaviest topic
misconstrued.
that I've had to research. Today we're talking about the Underground Railroad.
Yes.
And in this two-parter, we are going to be focusing predominantly the first episode, this one that we're on right now, talking about chattel slavery in the southern North American continent. Between 1600 and the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863.
Oh.
So this is pretty heavy. Okay, I get it. Patrick is so uncomfortable.
But I feel like I
I
do
kind of want to address the elephant in the room here. We do not have an African American guest today.
That is true.
Okay, and I
not
get
for
it.
lack of trying. Oh, by the way, before you, if you don't mind, before you continue on that. If you guys, just in case you don't think we're taking this seriously enough, we had a very long conversation before this about how exactly to address this. Like, for one, we were like, hey, producer Drew, probably don't be on mic for this one because adding an extra voice that's not African-American is probably not a good look. And then we talked to, I actually, my wife and I were hanging out with Javon Bartley, friend of the show, who was on our Fad Diets Through the Decades episode. I think that's episode 3.
Yeah, a friend of the show, what do they call a long-time listener, first-time caller, with past and future guests.
Yes. So Javon wants to be back on another show, and it's just, we haven't gotten back on the guests.
Maybe not this one.
We haven't gotten back on the guests. But Allison and I were hanging out with Javon and his wife, Erica, the other night, and I mentioned it to him. And he was like, oh, so you just want a token black guy for the Underground Railroad? Jokingly, he said this. And I was like, believe it or not, that was a conversation that we had after we told Drew that he couldn't be mic'd up. We were like, well, maybe we get an African.
I didn't want to be. Let's be clear. I don't want a microphone today.
Drew has been sitting.
I'm over here crying.
Drew has been sitting at the computer, shaking his head vigorously for a while. But we did think of that whenever we brought up. Okay, we don't need another non-black voice in the room.
I think it's important.
Should we bring a black voice? Does that make it look like we're getting a token black guy, et cetera, et cetera?
Already,
these are things. These are things.
Yes, these are definitely things. Here's another thing.
Because we take it seriously.
How goddamn uncomfortable it is to like go to your black friends and be like, "Hey, you want to be on my podcast?" Like, yeah, cool. What's the subject? You're like, "Ooh, hey, today, slavery."
Well, if it's any consolation, whenever it came up to Javon, he was saying that he can't wait to be on another episode. And I was like, do you want to be on Monday? And he was like, oh, I don't know if I can. I was like, we're doing the Underground Railroad. And it was like, just slowly, like just putting my hands over my face while I said it. And he was like, oh, so you want a token black guy? And I was like, no, that's not. And he just started laughing. He was down, but he didn't have time today. So
yeah, it's going to be hard as just us putting together this podcast to get representatives of every race that we talk about. In this context, I believe slavery and the Underground Railroad is a massively important part of American history in general.
Yes.
So we're just going to do it, man.
And and again, in the vein of our podcast and keeping with the theme here, is one that everybody knows the Underground Railroad, but what do you really know about the Underground Railroad?
In fact, like
Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, that's about it. That's what most people know.
Let me just kind of dig into this real quick, because even that area of the Underground Railroad, that is post-Revolutionary War.
Sure.
That's late 1700s.
And it was already, there was already people
like the big boom
north.
of slavery is like, I mean, by the Revolutionary War, no one was escaping north because Canada's British. So any slavery happening along the coast was British colonial slavery.
Yeah, there were a lot who went, I know in the early 1800s a lot, which was like, we were a new country at that point. A lot were going over to Mexico because
there's a lot of Mexico.
There's a lot of at the time
there's a lot of dipping back into
the Caribbean.
The Caribbean was heavily. I'm gonna go over all this. Okay, because I did a lot of research and
I did a very small amount because I wanted you to school me today.
Today, we're looking at the Underground Railroad, which, if you aren't familiar, is a network of white settlers and freed or escaped slaves in the American South that helped an estimated 100,000 enslaved black men and women escape from slavery in the period between 1600 and the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. And even after that, in some cases, where after emancipation, people would illegally keep slaves, or very slave-like circumstances, crop sharing,
Right.
stuff like that. There were still active emancipators after that period.
Right.
But that's a really fuzzy area, and the Underground Railroad by itself is a fuzzy organization. It was very loosely connected. There are no leaders, there are no designated meetings, there's no
that when
literature.
they started that ad campaign for the illegally downloading movies?
Yeah.
You wouldn't steal
You
a
wouldn't
car.
help an
You
escaped
wouldn't steal a
slave.
slave.
Dun, 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 dun.
Emancipating slaves is wrong.
You wouldn't emancipate a car.
You wouldn't emancipate a steak.
So yeah, no leaders. There were no designated meeting things. There was no insignia.
Yeah, there was no central.
Yeah, it was a guerrilla movement,
Right.
and it was also a highly dangerous criminal enterprise.
Big time.
It's got to be looked at like that because,
Particularly if you were the slave.
yeah, this
Not so much so if you were, because there were European Caucasian people who helped
yeah.
for not
Those
always
people-
magnanimous reasons.
Yeah, definitely not for always magnanimous reasons. Sometimes it was just money.
Right.
Sometimes it was like, pay me and I'll help you out. You can actually kind of frame this, obviously, in a very different circumstantial way.
And my point is, let's not forget that the penalties for those people were so much less than if you were
In many cases,
caught.
yes, but
as
that
a
kind
fugitive slave.
okay, so it kind of depends on your social strata at the time. Because if you were like a fine, upstanding British citizen or something, then yeah, maybe you get a slap on the wrist and a little fine.
Uh-huh.
But if you were just like a Quaker farmer or something, and they could fucking imprison you or
Yeah, there were a
execute
lot of those.
you.
Yeah.
And if you were like a free black person helping slaves escape, the penalty was slavery.
Didn't so like I said, I did a small amount of research. Did you see the thing where I don't know? I mean, I didn't really deep dive this, but George Washington once commented on a runaway slave that he was perturbed that a group of Quakers helped one of his slaves escape.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so the Quakers were pretty big on the.
Yeah, all this is, there's a big section of that where I want to talk about the Quakers, because religious abolitionists in America were really big.
Is that where they learned to make oatmeal?
Yeah, actually, that was the slaves were in return for helping them escape from chattel slavery.
They were like, let me
They
show
were
you
like,
how
hey,
to make
did you know
this.
that if you put hot water on this shit, it makes goop?
Let me show you how to make this morning gruel.
If you put cinnamon and raisins on it, it's better.
Some sugar, maybe some blackberries.
How do you take your oatmeal, Patrick?
Honestly, just cinnamon sugar.
Yeah, you do cinnamon sugar. I do brown sugar and butter.
Oh,
A little bit of milk, a little bit of milk
Yeah,
there
yeah,
to make
yeah,
it kind
yeah.
of like a.
I cook my
Well,
oats
it's
in
still
milk.
hot.
I cook my oats in milk,
I
not
cook
water.
my oats in water. Add a little bit of milk for the
Mm.
cool down. Brown sugar and butter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I cook my oats. Listen, it's been a really long time since I've done oatmeal,
Mm.
but oats milk and or a little heavy whipping cream in there.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's
Yeah,
good. Okay, so back
and
on
then
track.
cinnamon sugar, and then I help some slaves escape to lands where they won't be.
I haven't done that at all.
I haven't either. I'm just a big poser.
In figuring out how to talk about this subject, there is.
In true Mark Wahlberg spirit, if I had been there, though,
If I had been there,
if I was there,
If I had been there, it
if
would have
I
been
was
different.
there,
I'm
there
just
would have
saying,
been
it would have been different.
fucking slaves. I would have freed all of them.
Yeah, there is so much
Wicked fast too.
Even just talking about this, my brain is rushing through so many different topics that I want to talk about. There's no way I'm going to hit them all. But one thing is
This is going to be a two-parter. By the way,
this is a two-parter. But I'm trying to be just historically involved. As a contemporary society, people like to think hey, if I'd been there, I would have been different. I'd have been one of the good ones. Or where Kanye West was like, no, it's 300 years of slavery. It's a choice. Everybody's got
Jesus
a
Christ.
frame of reference in themselves to how they would have acted in the past.
Mhm.
But what it really comes down to is like this is a very locked down, very tight, heavily industrialized system
And
of commerce.
I think it's important that we periodically circle back to the number of slaves who escaped, estimated 30 to 50,000, are like a drop in the bucket compared to the millions of slaves over the course of, the 200 plus years of slavery that existed in this country.
There were
and
hundreds of thousands of escape attempts that ended terribly with executions and tortures and rapes.
And I think
beatings,
it's important to circle back and not, we have a tendency to sort of glorify sort of this heroic behavior, which it was.
I mean, a lot of it was
to
very
take
heroic.
that chance. But there were a lot of people who either never got that chance or, were not willing to take the risk to take that chance. And so I don't want to minimize sort of the struggle of the people who never even got the opportunity to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think a lot of what we do here is more historical analysis than just retelling. More than educating, we're trying to put a different perspective on the way contextualizing exactly. And in this context, the Underground Railroad, or escaping from the mass market of slavery in general, is a frightening, terrifying, dirty, embarrassing, humiliating in many cases situation
with dire consequences.
Dire
if you don't succeed.
It is all or nothing. It is the highest possible stakes. So okay, let me just get into it. I want to kind of reframe the conversation on all of this. Because one of the dangers of telling a story like this is that so much of it is hearsay and legend. It's not as though slave owners would be, like super diligent about keeping record of their slaves escaping, or
they put up posters in a lot of cases when they're about the ones who escaped.
It would usually be noted as something like, I lost, a $50 slave here. And like just forget about it after a while. It was more of a numbers game than anything. It's not like there was like a passionate pursuit for anything more than just profit for the most part. Right. So like the records of this kind of thing are really hard to keep track of. The materials are hard to keep track of. Paper from that time period isn't kicking it around anymore hardly, especially in the South with like the humidity and like all that kind of other climate stuff. But so most of what we know about this time period is going to be hearsay and legends. And legends of movements tend to polish the reality of the situation strongly for the retelling, you like to attribute glory and heroism to everyone involved. But in this case, I want you to keep in mind that as noble as the endeavor was, and it was a purely criminal enterprise. There is not a single thing legal about helping slaves escape.
Listen, again, to contextualize it, it legally is someone's property, and therefore helping a slave escape was akin to being a fucking thief.
Yeah, that's all it is in that context. On a human level, it's a noble endeavor to help a human being escape. But in the legality of the time, from the inception of the thought that you wanted to help a slave escape, you were committing a criminal enterprise. Right? So the idea that a vast secret network that traffics human beings, because this is human trafficking, in a different reframed form of it, but you're trafficking in people, trying to get them from one place to another. But like the idea of a vast secret network trafficking human beings underneath a larger, more encompassing legal network that traffics human beings, and the idea that network, like the secret one, would be completely run by noble stand-up people is just naive. There's and it sounds harsh.
I don't want to think of it that way, but sometimes we got to think of things in difficult ways on this podcast.
Oftentimes dangerous and profit-driven, but that doesn't mean that everyone was like that. The majority of the people working towards the freedom of what are they called, runaway slaves in general, fugitive slaves. Most of that after the American Revolution, those were Northern abolitionists, and they had money behind them. They had political intent behind them. There were bills being passed. There were big motivations. But for the hundreds of years that the British occupied, like the 13 colonies and the American coast,
200 years prior to revolution,
the majority of slaves that would escape would have to just kind of fuck off on their own. Like there was not a great network for that unless you were talking to slavers who
Right.
knew the routes and knew how to get people out. So if you could somehow pay the person that would sell you to the masters to get you out to somewhere else,
Oh,
then they'd get you out.
right.
Right.
I mean, obviously that involves some palm grease, and I would imagine.
Yeah, well, exactly. Those same established
So
traders.
how much money can you get from a person that you just shipped over from another continent and sold at an auction block to?
Yeah, but think about a greasy fuck like that being like, okay, so I sold this slave for $50 or $200 or whatever, and now they're offering me another like $30 on top of it that they managed to find or steal or squirrel away or
Right.
like secretly find. Or
I was going to say squirrel. There's no squirreling away. Where are you
Well,
going to get money?
It is also naive to think that the only form of like black person at this time was just like a field working slave.
Right,
Like
that's true.
a lot of people worked in shops, or you had blacksmiths, or even like entertainers, skilled musicians, and those people were subject to getting tips or making products that they could quietly sell. So there's always a way. I mean, like look at the American prison system, man. There's always a way to get some contraband or profit.
That's true. If you just kind of if you find yourself in the right position and you got a little.
But then, of course, think about those same people. So, sold this slave for $200. He's offering me $30 the next year to help, like, take him off someplace else. I could just get another $100 if I sell him again. So like that kind of cycle is, I mean, it's a roll of the dice.
Very, very famously, people who would put together posses to go catch fugitive slaves and return them.
Slave hunting was a big industry.
Slave hunters, and bring them back to where they were. They were sometimes
note.
Missing limbs.
Interesting note on slave
sometimes
hunters.
Dead.
Did you know that slave hunters would actually still get paid if they found the slave but didn't collect them?
No.
Yeah, if you were going to make, say, $25 for capturing a slave and bringing them back, you could still make $10 just for seeing them and going back and reporting where they were.
Just for saying, oh, this is...
They're like, they're too far gone.
He's in Cincinnati.
Yeah, exactly. I can't get him. Sorry. So there were many, many occasions where slave hunters would, feel some form of compassion and let somebody go,
Interesting.
Yeah, this is such a widely varied topic. So oftentimes the only way to keep somebody quiet that would see you out there or had some information about you was just like a payout, right? What?
No, I can't. I've just my own intrusive thoughts. That's fine. We're not gonna.
What are your intrusive thoughts?
No way, Jose.
What?
I was thinking about the terrible sort of things, the situations that slaves had to deal with, and you said the only way to keep them quiet, and I was like, stick the dogs on them, whip them, cut their fingers off.
Well,
that's a way. Cut their tongue out. There are lots of ways
common
that were used.
The inhumanity to man here is
you got me to dispel my intrusive thoughts. God damn it! Fuck you.
I thought it was going to be like, I was thinking about Legos.
No. I was very much locked in. I was just, when you said the only way to keep them quiet, I was like, I wasn't thinking about the people who found the slaves. I was thinking about the slaves, and then immediately I was like, oh, so many ways that were practiced fairly regularly.
Yeah, we'll get into.
And then I laughed because I didn't want to cry.
Yeah. Well, isn't that just the way
That's just the way it is.
It's the way we're just raw dog
Things
in reality,
will never be
man.
the same.
Yeah. What?
R.I.P. Biggie.
What?
That's just the way it is.
That's just the way it goes.
That's just the way it is.
Oh yeah.
Some things will never. Well, the original was some things will never
Bruce
change.
Hornsby.
Originally, it was some things will never change. But then when I'm going to say it.
Don't say it. Whatever.
Sean Combs did the tribute to
Sean P. Diddler.
Did the tribute to Biggie. They changed it to Things Will Never Be the Same.
He did that with that Bruce Hornsby song.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he just did the
No.
I'll be missing you.
Or maybe that was.
Yeah, you're thinking of the
right.
Police song.
No,
I'll be watching you, but
am I thinking of the Tupac song?
I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I do know that.
Did he sample that? Did he sample that
That's
song?
Just the Way It Is by Bruce Hornsby is a great song.
That was Pac.
No, it's Tupac, right? Changes? And still I see no change. Can a brother get a little piece?
So prescient to our topic.
I actually kind of was.
I'm not joking. So, anyways, with everything that we just said aside, not counting Bruce Hornsby, it's not to say that the people involved in the Underground Railroad were like predominantly bad. It was a criminal enterprise, but like there's a very noble intent behind it.
Of course.
You know? I think the vast majority of people involved in the movement were selfless and forthright. But you have to remember that the punishment for being caught assisting a fleeing slave to freedom was anything from beatings to imprisonment or death. And the punishment for free blacks was pretty exclusively death or enslavement.
Right.
And
so
women,
if you were already free.
Yeah, if you were already free, if you were born free.
Right, and you helped.
And you helped
a fugitive slave.
You're on the
you're a
auction
slave
block,
now.
Yeah. You're on the auction block that week.
Right, and then for white people it was like a fine.
Which is
or
like, look
prison.
at the hypocrisy inherent in that. Like you it's not as though you don't know that you're I can't. All right, okay. It gets me. I am so upset by slavery.
What is that?
I don't know. That was my effete northern liberal voice. I'm so upset by slavery. Can you believe what these people had to go through?
If I had been there, it would have been different.
Would have been no slavery. Would have been no slavery.
It would have gone away like that. I would have fixed it.
Master nothing. How about go fuck yourself? No.
God almighty.
But yeah, so like,
we're gonna have to hashtag Marky Mark on this one.
Oh yeah, but you got to figure that a lot of the
Mark Wahlberg,
Mr. Mark Wahlberg,
left the Funky Bunch behind, like a slave escaping to freedom, leaving their family behind.
Oh God, no, that's bad. That's bad. Okay, so you have to figure that a lot of the established places where slaves could hide out and like get supplies and food or rest for the night were family homes.
Yes.
So the people that were putting themselves on the line were not just, single men. You had whole families with children, women.
Yeah.
And women caught assisting slaves to freedom, especially black women like Harriet Tubman, were subject to, the worst possible situation.
Yeah.
Like, if you consider Harriet Tubman, who we'll talk about at length on the next episode, you have to consider the fact that if she had been caught leading slaves to freedom, she would have not only been beaten and hung, but also raped and tortured.
Right.
Like,
and she still came back like 80 times.
Yeah, but there's a lot of stories of, like, if the people she's guiding weren't quiet, she, like, put a gun to their heads.
Yeah.
Like, hey, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, wasn't there, like, famously, like, they almost got caught, and they came out of the wagon with guns, and were like, you're not catching us today.
Yeah. Well, the next episode, I'll do a whole Harriet Tubman thing. She's a fucking badass.
Oh, she was total badass.
So yeah, the
Frederick Douglass, put your money where your mouth is, dog.
What?
I called out.
Don't
Frederick
see
Douglass.
you pulling guns like.
You go on the diplomatic route. Come on.
Now Harriet Tubman
get your hands dirty.
And Mormon abolitionist John Brown have a cool like kind of intermingling thing.
Really?
Yeah, John Brown called her General Tubman.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that.
There's some cool shit. So like, when I'm talking about reframing this story, it's wide. It's a long-ranging topic, right, with a lot of different facets. But so you're talking specifically about frightened, stressed out, malnourished, desperate people making a last-ditch attempt to live free. Yeah,
frequently with children.
Frequently with children, oftentimes having left their families behind to God knows what.
Yeah.
But also knowing that being captured would mean death for them and probably their families. Like the stakes could not have been
would
higher.
they come back and kill the family that got left behind?
Oh, for sure.
Jesus.
Yeah, but probably not unless they caught the slave so that they could watch.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, here's your punishment. You get brought back to the plantation. We're going to kill your family in front of you.
And then kill you.
Yeah.
Fuck me.
After we castrate you or whatever. Like, whatever horrifying thing. Yeah, like, this is medieval torture horror. This is a nightmare. An absolute nightmare. 400 years of fucking nightmare.
And this was going on not that long ago.
Not long at all. Not long at all. Like 2 people ago, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was forever ago.
280-year-old people ago.
Exactly. It's super easy to look at the kind of like polished history class version of this kind of stuff. and just think like, yeah, brave white people freed honest, well-spoken slaves. It's just not the way this shit is. This is a down and dirty situation that spans hundreds
I
of
don't
years.
think I learned it quite so whitewashed, but I mean,
like there's the museum
there was
version.
certainly a whitewashing. Yeah,
You know, like every time when we were growing up in the 90s, right, you'd see like a video and it'd be like a black woman in the field, like silhouetted against stars, singing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot.
Oh my God.
And just be like, that's the North Star. We'll follow that to freedom.
Oh,
You know, and like it's way more of just like, I've got to get the fuck out of here because I'm dying. Like it's like so much more intense than that would possibly indicate.
This episode is intense.
Yeah, it has no choice.
Why did we settle on this one?
I don't know, man.
Because
Black
people don't know
History
enough
Month
about it.
and-
People don't know enough about
And
it.
also, we do kind of have to put our foot down and just say like we are going to cover the history. It doesn't matter if it's
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if it's difficult. We got to do it.
That's true. We've
Yeah.
said it on past episodes.
Like we can't shy away from things that have happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I don't want to. I don't want to at all. I want to fucking. I don't want to do slavery.
We have to do we have to do it with some poise and and some empathy.
I would rather make
Which
a
is-
bunch of dick jokes, but that does not lend itself particularly well to this topic.
There are still several hours to talk about. You know what? Never mind. Scratch everything I just started to say, and yeah, that's
Dun, dun. Patrick Wall
God damn it.
is about to realize you can't do boner jokes on an episode about slavery. So, on Delete Everything, we are dedicated to reminding you how complicated and dirty and intense the world really is. And with that in mind, I have the extremely unpleasant task of being the middle-aged white man that's about to spend 2 hours explaining the history of American slavery to you.
And I'm Latino.
Yeah. You get like a little partial.
I get a little credit.
Producer Drew's not even in the room.
I'm not here.
Drew's just
But okay, I
still shaking his head
in-
vigorously.
in the effort to kind of reframe this in a more dramatic telling.
Okay.
I used to do this thing when I worked in elementary schools.
Uh-huh.
I worked in my 20s, and I'd like the listeners to give this a try. Okay, so I'd have the kids imagine that the Earth wasn't spinning horizontally like a top,
Mhm.
but it's actually rolling up towards the sun like a rolling pin.
Right.
Right. That way, at any given time of the day, a different country's on top.
Sure.
Right? And it gives us a different frame of reference for where the top and bottom of everything is. In this context, if we're thinking about the coastline of the United States in the 1600s,
Okay.
it puts the Atlantic Ocean in front of us
Uh-huh.
and the south to our right and the north to the left.
Uh-huh.
Right? And that way, instead of just being like, yeah, they just got to make it up to freedom, it's like you're in an occupied land, right? It's
Uh-huh.
like, yeah, if you go a little south, you might be able to get out. Go a little north, you might be able to get out.
Sure.
Also, if you hit the coast, you might be able to travel on the water. And if
Right.
you fall back, you can get into the French
Well,
Louisiana
yeah, I
territory.
mean, even Florida, depending on when and what part of Florida.
Yeah, exactly. So like in this context, especially during the British colonies,
Mm.
thinking about like just heading north to freedom, that's nothing. That doesn't
Right,
work at all.
Right.
Think of it more like a battle map. Like you've got the occupied slave states,
Uh-huh.
and then you've got essentially south to Florida,
Uh-huh.
or you've got west to the Louisiana territories.
Right.
Those are your freedom areas,
Mhm.
unless you can get to a different country's Caribbean island,
Mm-hmm.
right? So since this is a two-parter, I've got a little time to flex, and I want to go over how the system of antebellum slavery was established in America. Obviously, I'm not just going to do like the history of slavery, because that would essentially cover the entirety of human history.
Yeah.
But I can start somewhere. So, all right. So I'll start where the starting's good. Okay.
In order for no one to be upset or offended, we are very aware that slavery has existed in lots of other countries for literal millennia
Yeah. This,
prior to the discovery of the New World and chattel slavery in the Americas. Full stop.
this is a dramatic story that spans hundreds of years, but it's not unique. It is
Right.
it is interesting. I'll say that.
It is an episode on our podcast because it's a very important part of our history as a nation.
Right. So, talking about the transatlantic slave trade, I'll start right at the beginning. So, sometime in the 1500s, Africans decided they wanted to be slaves, and then they called up Europe and said, "Hey, come pick us up. We've got slaving to do."
It's slaving time.
It's like,
Slaving makes me feel good.
oh,
The Ghostbusters. But I changed it. Slaving makes me feel good.
Okay.
I ain't afraid of no slaves.
The African slave trade has its own history, and it spans hundreds of years. It's really intense, and it was in full swing before the New World was even a thing.
Yes, for sure.
So countries like Portugal, England, France, Spain, Belgium, they already had established slaving routes in Africa, but it was not to the level that it became until Europeans started dicking around in the Caribbean. Like chattel slavery was in full use when the Spanish colonized South America, and into lower North America, and like Texas and Florida. And it wasn't unusual for early European colonists to have slaves, but the numbers were far fewer in like the 1500s.
Sure.
A massive amount of what would become modern European slave culture was built around sugarcane plantations in like Jamaica, Barbados,
Cuba,
assorted Caribbean islands, pretty
Yeah.
much all of them. Because like a personal favorite historical fact that comes from being like a bar nerd is that sugarcane doesn't grow in Europe. Right. So for all of recorded history up until like the last like 500 years, Europe didn't get to have sugar.
Right.
They had to have like honey and fucking maple syrup or sap syrup and
Splenda,
stuff.
I think.
Yeah. They were using the pink
Sweet and low.
yeah, stevia. So, but they like the European countries would like go to like Indonesia, and they had naturally growing sugarcane there,
Right.
and they'd be like, "What the fuck is this?" And they just fucking start jacking it as soon as they
Yeah.
tasted that sweet sugar. Like they're so fucking hungry for sugar. But there was no way to make it because anytime they transported sugarcane plants like to European countries, they'd die. They
Right.
couldn't handle the climate.
Okay.
So, like, essentially, the fucking second that they were able to colonize a territory, because they couldn't take Indonesia. Indonesia is a little harder of a country
Yeah.
to conquer than you might fucking think.
Yeah, they had some tough motherfuckers.
Yeah, that's
there.
one of those what I like to call machete countries. Jungle machete countries are traditionally the hardest ones to conquer. There's ice gun countries, and there's jungle machete countries.
And that was Indonesia's. It's sort of in that weird space between
A blink and a tear.
Asia and Polynesia, and Indonesia also has like a ludicrous amount of islands, and you got to believe that some of those Polynesian cultures that were like, we're gonna hack you up and eat you.
Yeah.
Were like back then, not currently, but back then, like those guys aren't traditionally easy to get onto their turf and be like, we're gonna take you with our single shot muskets.
Really fucking one day want to do an episode. Like, put this on the list. I want to do an episode about like ocean colonization and travel and the many instances of just ships from European countries landing on like unknown shores and coming across tribes that had never contacted another person and just being fucking eviscerated.
Yeah,
it happened all the time.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
for
there's
sure.
there's a period of like 100 years where it like you have a map and you'd be sailing and be like, don't land at this one. You can land at this one. Don't land at this one.
It happened a lot in Central America before the Spanish really
Yeah.
got their shit
Yeah,
together.
yeah. People be eating. We're still going to do that episode on cannibalism.
Yeah.
That's going to be cool. It's going to be tasty. So when the Caribbean islands turned out to be the same meridian as Indonesia and they could grow sugarcane there, like the second they figured that out, fucking every European country scrambled to claim islands all over the place, resulting in what, the still to this day mixed up claims on Caribbean islands. That's why I hear about like U.S. Virgin Islands, British Virgin Islands, why they speak French in Dominica and Spanish in Cuba and shit like that. But
why Haiti and Dominican Republic are on the same island?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One side speaks French, one side speaks Spanish.
Yeah, exactly. And like there were wars and battles about all this forever. The like Napoleonic Wars were all over this shit, and sugarcane grew so rapidly and was bought at such an insane rate by Europeans that the demand like far outstripped the supply, leading to industrialization. and an increase
Of
in
course.
the slave force, right? So
Of
where
course.
a single cane farm might have had like 5 slaves to start out, after they started getting rich and the demand increased, they'd buy 5 more slaves, 5 more, and then they build a manor house, and then they'd need refining equipment.
And then you make those slaves have more slaves.
and yeah, exactly. And then you're breeding some more slaves.
What is that
and then
what is that process?
I think it's called putting a man and a woman in a room together
Sure.
and saying, "Hey, you have to fuck. You're my slave."
Like I said, what is that process?
They go, here we go.
What if one of you isn't attracted to the other?
I mean,
What if? Well, I mean, I guess.
I'm pretty sure they kill them if they don't do what they're told. So
Yeah.
I mean, you're asking questions that can be pretty much summed up by slavery.
I'm so.
Slavery bad, by the way. I don't know if we mentioned that. We don't like it.
I think we've mentioned that.
I think the indignity,
I think we're on record.
the indignity of not having the freedom to live your own life and having that life committed to the servitude of another person is about the most horrific hell that a living being can go through.
I'm certain that somewhere through these episodes that we've done so far, we are firmly on record as not being cool with this.
Yeah, but like maybe my own personal stance, just in general, on like not having liberty is that's that's hell on earth. That's the most hell you can have.
Right. Or just the ability to make decisions on your own.
Yeah.
You know, whether those be that I can do whatever I want as long as it doesn't affect someone else vis-a-vis liberty, or just like I'm not going to go to work today.
Mind you, I believe that
I feel sick.
everyone knows that stripping liberty from somebody is about the worst punishment you can give. That's why so much of the focus on the American prison system is punishment. Anyway, on that happy little note, let's get back to the fun stuff, right? So, but yeah, so like, you know, they have more slaves, they start getting rich, and then the demand increases, and then they get refining equipment for the sugar. So they get refined sugar instead of just sugar cane. And then the molasses from the refining process would be distilled into rum. And after that, they need another 10 slaves to run the distillery that they built, and so on, and profit boomed.
Well, yeah, I mean, you took labor out of your mix there, so your bottom line's looking great.
The Atlantic slave trade is what brought most of the population of the Caribbean islands, like the current population.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, there were some native islanders in the Caribbean.
Black people are not native to Jamaica.
No, not at all. But you did have a smaller population of natives called the Taino and the Arawak, but they were displaced or enslaved themselves, and over the decades, like they'd be integrated into the slave population.
The Arawak were enslaved like immediately by Columbus.
Yeah.
And many of them sent back to Europe as like both slaves and oddities.
We covered that a little bit in I believe the Thanksgiving
Mayflower
and Thanksgiving episode. It is the same thing.
Yep.
It's the same. The Mayflower episode, where they just kind of shuttle native slaves back and forth. Yeah, which is cool. So there was a massive slave industry.
Riley, I don't think that's the word.
Yeah, massive slave industry, and then a hugely disproportionate number of slaves to masters happened, and that would result later in some dramatic and intense revolts that I would love to cover eventually. I would call that episode "Whoops, All Machetes."
Is that a Captain Crunch reference?
Yes, it is. But I would like to.
I think when we get to that era of slavery, where we have these large plantations, both in the Caribbean for the sugarcane industry, and then once textiles start being big business and the cotton industry booms in the southern U.S., and you have these plantations with hundreds of slaves working, I think that's where you get a lot of the disconnect, where people are like, well, why? They could have just chosen not to be slaves.
Yeah, it's the Kanye West with 300 years of slavery sounds like a choice. Yeah,
yeah. If there's 150 slaves and only one family running, and it's like that's not. First of all, those families employed people to keep the slaves working.
They're guards. They're armed
Lots of
men.
them.
Yeah.
That was going to be my other point. Those people have guns and whips and knives and whatever, and you have nothing.
And when you think of
and they're on horseback, and you're not.
So it's when you think of okay, so a small Caribbean island, say you've got 100 slaves on there and 30 white people,
right?
if you have a
30
revolt,
enslavers.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, enslavers in general, of varying different ethnicities.
Right.
You get the Spanish and some Italians in there. You know, the
They're
Dutch.
those are all white.
Yeah,
Those are all white people.
Italians.
Ye-
I don't accept it. So
Did you ever seen a Northern Italian?
a Northern Italian.
Yeah. It wasn't until the
I
Moroccans
mean, like
came
I've been to New
across-
York, but
Jesus. This wasn't
Hey,
until the
Tony
Moroccans.
Pizza over here.
It wasn't until the North Africans came across the Mediterranean and started fucking enslaving Italians and
Whoa,
raping and murdering them that you started having like the more dark skinned Southern Italians. Have you ever seen
True Romance? Yeah, I've
Have
seen
you-
True Romance. Everyone's seen True Romance. Don't Google it. Okay, so the thing that
That's a great monologue. It's a horrible monologue, but the content is pretty rough.
I just like Dennis Hopper.
The monologue, Dennis Hopper's monologue before he knows he's about to get fucking murdered by Christopher Walken.
Savagely racist, but
Wow.
very well written.
I'm going to kill you now. Where's your son? Christian Slater.
I can do a Christian Slater.
Yeah, can you?
Hold on. Hey, I'm Christian Slater.
It's so almost there.
That was pretty good, right?
It was.
Hey, this is Broken Arrow.
But there's a monologue there by Dennis Hopper, which is racially very fucking oof. But he's doing it, he's doing it to get under Christopher Walken's
So
skin,
what
knowing that he's
Patrick-
about to get murdered.
What Patrick is doing is reframing the conversation so that the Africans are the bad guys. I don't know if you
That is not what I said.
because you said North Africans went up to Italy, right?
Yeah,
Bringing up old shit.
when before the Roman Empire existed.
Why are you always bringing up old shit?
I don't know why are we talking about fucking chattel slavery.
I don't know.
Why don't you just tell
Shits
black
and
people to get
gigs,
over it?
baby. Okay, so
Jesus.
something that might actually blow some people's minds is that during the I'm sorry, I've been giving Patrick some shit in this episode. I shouldn't. He's doing a great job. And he's very uncomfortable.
So uncomfortable.
So uncomfortable. I mean, this is just kind of a payback for making me do the true crime episode.
Which you loved by the end.
Yeah, but give me an hour of like, oh,
It wasn't quite that long.
Yeah.
You were engaged by like 20 minutes.
it was a surprisingly interesting topic, and it wasn't
Thank you.
all hacky slashy like I thought. It wasn't all Bailey Sarian.
Yeah, hey, it's almost like I did the notes in a way that it wasn't going to be that way. We were going to be able to approach it from like a, holy shit, this guy's a fuckbag, and make jokes and talk about it clinically.
That's what I'm doing. I'm doing slavery is a fuckbag. I want everyone to know slavery is bad.
Okay.
But that's something that really might that people may not know, a majority of people, something undiscovered, say, or forgotten, deleted even,
All right.
is that during the early years of American colonization, a lot of the Africans that traveled with European settlers weren't slaves.
Mhm.
Before the Atlantic slave trade really exploded with the sugarcane plantations, a huge percentage of Africans in the New World were just paid workers or slavers or sailors. There were slavers too, don't get me
There
wrong.
were-
But like,
I know they were.
there were just paid workers, sailors, or
Yeah,
just
there
settlers.
were black people who owned black people.
Yeah,
that is
that's
a thing.
It's a thing. Wasn't the most common
It
thing.
wasn't
but,
as common as white people who owned black people.
but it happened. But a lot of the black people that came into like South America with the Spanish were, and married and had families with people in South America,
Right.
were just workers.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes subjects of like the Spanish crown, sometimes international travelers,
Right.
What have you. But it wasn't until like the industrialization of slavery
Right.
with cane plantations that it became kind of unusual to think of free Africans in the New World.
I think a lot of people don't think about the fact that the Mediterranean Sea is not that big, and Northern Africa, i.e., black people, were not that far away from Europeans. They were not that far away from the southern coast of Europe.
Still aren't.
And so, you're right, they're still that way. They haven't changed it. So,
I've played Assassin's Creed Odyssey. The Mediterranean is like 10 minutes wide. Everyone knows those games are completely accurate.
Totally accurate. But my point being that,
Wonder when they're going to do Assassin's Creed American Slavery.
I don't, Jesus, fuck, holy shit.
Assassin's Creed Antebellum.
It will happen at some point.
That'd be cool. It'd be like a free slave. He'd have like a fucking weapon that's like a chain on his wrist.
You need to sell this idea, man.
I think it'd be cool because all you do is just kill slavers. The whole thing.
Yeah,
you have
you
fucking
It would be like Red Dead Redemption, but you're a freed slave who can climb good
yeah, and you get fucking. God damn it!
and jump
Just
off of
talked
tall
about
things.
her.
Harriet Tubman.
Harriet Tubman would totally turn out to be like one of the Assassins Guild. And she's the one who'd like teach you all like the cool tricks and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Frederick Douglass would teach you
Frederick Douglass would just be
How
he would just be one of
read?
the administrators, because there's a lot of characters in those games that are like just like, hey, I'm gonna build you like a cool weapon
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
something.
What I was gonna say is that people in Europe were not like it's not. I feel like people have a tendency to think in terms of like, well, the European colonizers were colonizing, and then one day they just happened to be in Africa and be like, oh, these people are in chains and ready to go, so let's go. Like Africans and Europeans had centuries
Yeah.
of going back and forth. And by the way,
Trade, battle.
before the Roman Empire, you had shit even before the fucking Egyptian Empire.
Mhm.
You had Sumerians, and there are centuries, if not millennia of interaction between as these two nations became, or these two continents became their own sort of separate things.
See, this is
when
one
the
of the-
world was smaller.
This is one of those reasons that I like that exercise of thinking of the world as spinning up instead of side to side, because like it's like the sun is shining on all of this at one point or another.
Yeah.
There's always ripples and action and history in
Right.
all these separate areas. So what we're talking about with like transatlantic slavery in the Americas is just one small block on a globe that is
Right.
fucking constantly doing a bunch of crazy shit.
And slavers had to go to very specific parts of Africa because there were other parts of Africa that if they pulled a ship up and said, hey, you got any slaves? They'd get fucking murdered immediately.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's just war all over Africa, the African coast for God knows how long.
yeah,
But that is not the topic.
you're right. Sorry, I digress.
I digress. I was digressing.
We can both digress.
So as a result of the success of the sugar plantations in the Caribbean,
Separate but equal digression.
whoa,
Yeah.
I mean like maybe 3/4 of an equal digression.
3/5, I think, is
That's
what.
3/5. Fuck piss. So all right, because the sugar plantations of the Caribbean did so well, and like, do you want to go back?
No, I don't. I just
3/5 of a compromise.
Let's power through. Let's power through this.
Dred Scott. So also as a result of fucking goddamn it, train of thought. It's like an underground train of thought that I can't keep track of. It's like this fuzzy network. Because fucking sugar took off so hard in the Caribbean, they like industrialized chattel slavery, right? It became a market and it took off in North America, predominantly in the southern colonies that would become like the American South, in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, the Carolinas, and the Virginias. Landowners would actually convert their property into farmland. So like if you say you were just like you had a family of settlers and they were like, hey, we're just gonna settle out here in Virginia, and we'll be hunters, or I'm a blacksmith or something. After chattel slavery started becoming so profitable in the Caribbean, they'd be like, fucking clear the land, let's get some slaves. Like we could make some shit.
Yeah, and then eventually, Kentucky, Missouri.
Yeah, it was kind of like the Bitcoin
Alabama.
of
What?
early British colonialization. It was just like everybody was like, oh, we got to get us some Bitcoin.
I don't see the you know what? Okay. I'm just going to accept it.
I guess maybe we're like a Dogecoin. I don't know.
This dog ain't got no fight left in him. I'm just listening now.
So yeah, people would convert their land into farms, get slaves so they could like accrue wealth through industrialized farming. And this would all reach a fever pitch during the Industrial Revolution. Which is kind of where we're going to end the episode.
Okay.
But for this episode, I want to cover the beginnings of escape routes for slaves under British colonial rule. Right? It just so happens that we're recording this here in St. Augustine, Florida. St. Augustine, what's the spiel?
The longest permanently settled or continuously settled European colony in the history of the contiguous United States of America.
Not bad. So it was a Spanish colony right near the border of British Georgia. Like if you know the topography of Florida, it's like St. Augustine would be, on a horse, a day's ride from the border of Georgia.
If you're in a car on Interstate 95,
About 2
about
hours.
an hour and a half,
Hour and a half to get to
2
Georgia. I
hours.
go to Georgia all the fucking time. So
Yeah, about 2
hour
hours.
and a half, 2 hours.
Somewhere between an hour and a half and 2 hours, depending
You
on
could
traffic.
be in Savannah, Georgia, which is one of the major ports of like British colonialism.
Was the 295 Beltway there at the time, or was that pre?
I think they called that the King's Road. And it was rife with bandits.
Oh no!
Oh no!
Oh no!
Oh,
Wait, it wouldn't be called the King's Road. It was a Spanish colony.
El King's Road. So
Calle del Rey.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, you're the fucking Spanish one. I don't know.
Sorry.
Do you speak Spanish as well as Portuguese?
Mhm.
God damn. So St. Augustine is a British or a fucking Spanish colony. It's right near the border of British Georgia. And during the early colonial period, if you were enslaved in a British colony, that meant you were enslaved from like essentially from the Florida border
Yeah.
to fucking
The whole thing.
to Antarctica.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
'cause
you're pretty much fucked going north.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
there's
yeah.
not a whole lot you could do. So many fugitive slaves would then venture deeper into like French territories, and a lot of them would hop on down to Florida.
Because we've got some French territories in modern day Canada at the time.
Yeah, but those would be like west. You know,
Okay.
like you do have like you have some French stuff up there, but it would be fucking hard to get to.
Right.
It'd be like.
And I think there was still a lot of fighting going on.
Yeah,
for that
and
too,
you also
so-
like with the colonies, if you're gonna cross into Canada, you got to go through like the main wilderness and shit.
Right.
Like it is essentially impossible to reach that area on land.
Okay.
You know, like maybe if you were to hit like a ship, you could get there, but at the same time, like
Gotta be real fucking
you're
lucky
you're,
to not
yeah,
get
you're
seen,
gonna be
yeah.
going past fucking Boston and Philadelphia and
Yeah,
shit,
yeah,
like the
yeah.
most heavily patrolled and fortified British settlements, right? So
Well, I found out through my research that a lot of the Underground Railroad passed through Boone County, Kentucky, which I have been to, and is just across the river from Cincinnati. So a lot of once you got across the river, once you got to Cincinnati, then you were considered a free slave. And then there was a lot
that makes
of
a lot of sense,
fuckery.
actually. I've always because I'm from Michigan, right? And I used to take I-75 back and forth a lot from Florida to Michigan.
Right.
There's a pretty, main thoroughfare, 95, 75. These are like
Right,
the
right,
big
yeah.
ones that
Big
that send you
north-south
north.
routes.
Yeah, the Michigan-Florida road is 75, and on 75, when you cross into Cincinnati, there's a big-ass river, big rusty bridge, and it's like, it feels like a demarcation line. It's
Yeah.
like, it's one of those moments, kind of like moving from Florida into Georgia.
Right.
You cross a big-ass river, and you're like, oh, this is a natural
And then
delineation.
you get into
yeah.
Cincinnati, you're like, what's that smell?
Yeah. Kind of.
Cincinnati has a smell.
It's an industrial town. Yeah, it's got like Jacksonville. It's got like a wet paper fart smell.
Yeah, that's
Cincinnati
pretty
sucks.
accurate. It's not a great town.
Not great.
I'm sure it's got its little
And I'm
gems.
not giving Ohio a bunch of shit just because I'm from Michigan. I get it. Ohio's got its stuff.
I live in Jacksonville, Florida.
Jacksonville
and
sucks
it's
so bad.
And
dude.
like I said about Cincinnati, it's got its gems. You just got to, if you are from anywhere else and you're just going to Jacksonville for some reason, Jacksonville blows.
fucking blows
hard.
dick so bad.
There are parts
I'm
of Jacksonville
surprised
I
that when
like
slaves
because I know
were
what they are.
escaping from British colonial rule in Georgia, if they were passing through the area known as Jacksonville, they'd be like, ugh,
Yeah, we don't want to go through there.
this
We got to get their fucking
shit.
all those shopping plazas.
Well, actually, I mean, which
Why are there 48 Chili's?
which is interesting
in that
because
place?
we talked on the Western Push episodes. What do we call those? Western settlements?
Western expansion.
Western expansion. That's it. Them fucking things.
Yeah.
We talked
We
about
only did 3
we
of
talked
them.
about the Negro Fort.
Yes.
Yeah, the Negro Fort was a place where a lot of escaped slaves coming out of the British
Near modern Pensacola.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of just heading south to St. Augustine, they would also go into the Florida Panhandle because Spain had a strong like standing rule of if you declared for Spain and Catholicism,
Right,
like if you
you could
converted to
be- yeah.
Catholicism, then you just become a citizen.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Also here in St. Augustine, we had Fort Mose, which
Yeah,
was
absolutely.
which was a almost entirely black
Well, so
fortification.
what happened was in October of 1687, the first recorded fugitive slaves of the Americas.
And what year is this?
This is 1687.
Okay.
So the first recorded fugitive slaves
Uh-huh.
arriving in like Spanish colonies
Okay.
from the British.
Sure.
Arrived. So it was they arrived in St. Augustine. There was
Okay,
a governor
nice.
at the time named Diego de Quiroga.
Uh-huh.
He reported to Spain that 8 men, 2 women, and a 3-year-old nursing child had made good their escape in a boat.
Mm-hmm.
6 of the men were put to work on the new Castillo, the Castillo de San Marcos, which is a big ass fort in
Big
downtown
old
St.
fort in
Augustine.
downtown St. Augustine.
No,
Right
it's-
down the road
it's-
from us.
It's a lot like the fort in
San Juan, Puerto Rico.
San Juan. He says it like that. I can't. San Juan, Puerto Rico.
San Juan.
San Juan.
San Juan.
Yeah, San Juan, Puerto Rico. So there's a big ass fort there too. We got that.
They're very similar to one
Very
another.
similar.
San Juan's bigger.
So the six of the men were put to work on the Castillo. The other 2 were assigned to work with the blacksmiths, and there's an indication that they may have had skills in that area.
Sure.
The women became domestic servants in the house of the governor.
Okay.
All were reportedly paid for their labor.
Okay.
Yeah. So the next fall, when an English official arrived
What are you doing with all these slaves here?
That was exactly how he did his. Oi, wobbly jubbly. What?
That wasn't proper enough. He's
Typical.
a British official in the 1600s.
Yeah. Hey, what are you doing with all these slaves?
Oh my!
Hey, you filthy Spaniards.
Where have you accrued all of these Negroes? Can you pay them?
When an English
You let them
official
touch your children?
arrived the next fall to claim the escaped slaves, Governor Quiroga refused to release them on the grounds that they
Wait,
had
somebody came back to claim them?
Yeah, they tracked them down.
After how long?
After a year, there was like fucking like the next fall. They were like, "Oh, we
A
figured
year?
out
No.
we found out where they were, and we're coming for them." They're coming from the Carolinas.
That's not how anything works.
So this guy gets dispatched to go on down to Spain and be like, "Excuse me,
I just found out.
Governor Quiroga."
I just found out that had I not bought the extended warranty when I bought my vehicle, that a thing that I just brought it to get taken care of,
Pretty much boned.
it would have been I would have had to pay
Yeah.
for that. And
Yeah,
thankfully, I bought the extended warranty. So warranty.
And I doubt they had a receipt for these human beings. So just the word of one British jerk.
Yeah.
Excuse
Those-
me, these are my slaves.
Those Negroes belong to my chap, Henry Wigglesworth, the affluent plantation owner in the Carolinas.
If you return the slaves, you'll be paid handsomely in whatever currency, the peso or what have you.
We shall come back with many more people to take these savages back.
Savages? No.
I'm sure they referred to them as savages too.
They had other words for him. So when the English
boy.
official arrived the next fall to claim him, Governor Quiroga refused to release them on the grounds that they'd been converted to Catholicism.
Good.
They'd married into the town, and they were usefully employed.
I like that
Thus,
mayor.
a fugitive slave policy began to evolve in the Florida colonies.
Yes.
In 1693, King Charles II issued the first official position on the runaways, giving liberty to all the men as well as the women, so that by their example and by my liberality, others will do the same. Is essentially, so
Yeah, you're gonna have to paraphrase that one for me.
what he's saying is
I'm not picking apart early 1700s King
Charles-
proclamations.
King Charles II of Spain
Mm.
issued
Oh, okay.
issued the position that on all runaways, you give them liberty, the men and the women,
Uh huh.
and by their example of my charity, essentially, they will in turn be charitable to others and bring more people down to our colonies.
Okay.
Right? So he's like, I'm setting a good example so that we can steal their shit, essentially.
I was gonna say, does my charity make them charitable? Does that mean they'll be slaves for us now?
Essentially. Yeah, it's very much like, well, they're going to come down and I'm going to free them. They're going to become like our people.
Here's your liberty, but now you work for me for free.
The idea is it's very good. If there's a slave and you're like, hey, I'll free you as long as you work for me, but I'll pay you, then that slave will probably be super loyal to you from then on.
Say that's a better situation than the one that you were in previously.
Yeah, the
I don't
majority.
know that it's a great situation, but it's
I know that
baby steps, I guess.
everything has its variables, but I know that if I were in a very bad situation and somebody offered me like a leg up or a helping hand, traditionally I've been very loyal to anyone that's ever helped me out of like positions of debt or.
Honestly, I think just by way of you'll have a job, you'll get paid, you won't be beaten and raped and whatever, forced to do shit.
Yeah, we've got our own slaves for that. Yeah. Yeah,
Like I said, that's a step in the right direction.
You gotta figure that
I
this
doubt
position-
it was perfect, but
the Spanish had slaves as well. The Spanish have multiple colonies in the Caribbean. The Florida colonies are closer to the Caribbean than anything. Like they're a huge part of the industrialized chattel slavery. But it's also like Spanish colonization in Florida was.
I do know that Spain abolished slavery way before England did.
Yeah, way before. Yeah, but not yet.
Okay, well, yeah, not in the late 16s, early 17s.
So colonizing Florida was really fucking hard. It's a swampy, miserable, mosquito-filled death pole.
Yeah,
yeah. It's just
is.
It's a miserable hellscape to try and survive.
It's fully
in.
colonized, and it's still
It's
that
still
way.
real hard to live here sometimes. Like being outside in this state will fucking kill you. So
Sure
like
can.
There were many colonies and there were a lot of slaves, but it still was just a hard state to populate for the most part. But in the decades following the king's decree, many more enslaved Africans escaped from the Carolinas and found refuge in Spanish Florida, prompting additional royal decrees
So then there's your proof that it was a better situation. We don't
yeah.
want to speak for anybody.
Or at the very least, the legend of it was a better situation. You know?
Oh, it's true.
You know, like, hey, you are, you know, you're not going to be a slave, but I mean, you do have to be a like Catholic, and you're beholden to the crown, and you have to do whatever these white people say.
Right.
But you're not a slave. You do get paid something. You know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a better situation. A lot of better going on here.
A lot of shades of gray, probably.
Multiple levels of shades of gray.
Right.
50 shades. There are 50 shades of gray.
50.
Yes, actually,
Okay.
Different kind of whipping.
I was gonna say, I feel like they came from.
There are
50
some
Shades of Grey in there.
similarities. So in 1733, reinforcing the offer of freedom, you got a bunch of extra royal decrees from Spain, but the decrees like prohibiting the reimbursement of the English for escaped slaves. Like there was a rule that was like if
I'm sorry. All I could think about was, were there a lot of slave masters like dripping wax on slave nipples? Is that
actually there is a there's a strong
hot
history,
tar? Probably.
strong history of homoerotic torture.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah.
We've talked about this and
Yeah,
talked about
we talked
covering
about
it. Yeah.
have we mentioned on the podcast the book The Delectable Negro?
That's gonna be in our cannibalism episode.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm gonna just pull up the
We're,
deets
let's
on this.
not have people research our shit before we research our shit.
I think that we can mention the name of this book.
I don't think anyone should mention the name of this book.
It is The Delectable Negro by Vincent Woodward. It's The Delectable Negro, Human Consumption and Homoeroticism Within the U.S. Slave Culture. Yeah. Available on Audible.
It's not surprising if you look at the fetishization of
Not to be confused with the fetishization.
there's a big movement in
big cheese
there's a
thing, yeah.
big cheese movement in Greece. If you look at the fetish, that's a tough word for me to say.
It's
Fetishization.
Me too.
Fetishization of female slaves by male slave owners over several texts that we have that in some cases implement very important U.S. figures in our history.
Mm-hmm.
It's not surprising that would cross
Looking
over.
at you, Jefferson.
Yeah, it's not surprising that would cross over to some other people who had some more, let's call it liberal views on
Different kind of liberal.
sex. On sex and with whom one should have it with.
Kinky slave owners, I guess.
Mhm. Sloppy, greasy,
Sloppy, greasy, gross,
Slappy.
slippy, sloppy,
cranky.
bad. All of this is bad.
Yes.
Just as a passing mention, there's a lot of sexualization and fetishization, homoeroticism, BDSM, non-consensual BDSM.
Right, of owning a person and being able to do whatever the fuck
Yeah,
you
so
want with them.
there's a lot of this.
Male
It's-
or female.
It's all very sadistic. There's like, if you, I'm not encouraging you to read the works of like the Marquis de Sade, but like if you ever find yourself in a position
Yeah,
to
why not?
take a look, it's a lot of that kind of
Yeah,
shit.
you find worse shit on certain websites in the internet.
I mean, a lot of it started with that though.
Yeah.
Like back at the time in British colonial,
he was
the
an
British
absolute
colonial
fucking
rule,
debaucherous fuck.
the works of the Marquis de Sade were probably accessible and pretty fucked up.
Yeah,
Pretty fucked up stuff.
he was a man of tastes. I don't know
Have you
which adjective
You
to
ever
put
read
on front
any
of that.
of de Sade stuff?
Paraphrased versions on the. I have not actually read
I actually had
his.
I read
account.
one of his books. What's it called? Justine. I think it's called Justine.
Mhm.
It is absolutely abhorrent, absolutely disgusting, horrific, and non-redemptive.
Okay.
Anyway, so in 1733, a bunch of decrees were passed reinforcing the offer of freedom, prohibiting the reimbursement of the English for escaped slaves. So, like, if slaves escaped from England and came to Spain,
Mhm.
or from the English colonies and came to the Spanish colonies, the English weren't allowed to come be like, "Hey, pay me for my slaves."
Right.
The Spanish were supposed to go, "Hey, suck our dicks." Then, like, other things, like, it required 4 years of service to the Spanish crown in order to become free. So you would have to, like, come into the Spanish colony and then work as
So
a
you're
slave.
going from slave to indentured servant.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but it's rent to own. So many freedom seekers.
Fucking Z-Best slaves?
Yes, Z-Best slaves. Yes.
Aaron's?
Yeah.
God almighty. Okay.
So many freedom seekers came to Florida, and in 1738, Governor Manuel de Montiano granted freedom seekers a plot of land about 2 miles north of St. Augustine, where they could build their own settlement and fort. The people became Catholics. They adopted Spanish names,
That's
Spanish
Fort Mose?
culture. Exactly. So they had some African flavor to like their
Curried goat,
everything,
the,
having been African or second generation.
mhm.
You know. So the settlement.
Nothing for curried goat, huh?
So the settlement was called Gracia Real de Santa Teresa de Mose.
Nailed it.
Was it good?
No.
You do it.
Santa Gracia the what?
It's Gracia Real de Santa Teresa de Mose.
Santa Gracia Real de Maria Teresa what?
Yeah, that one. Fort Mose. So they called it Fort Mose. It became the first legally established free African settlement in North America.
Yep.
And we're recording this 8 minutes from there.
I would have said 12, but okay.
I've been there many times. It's a so unassuming little museum and area.
Yeah. The fort part of it is not.
Yeah, the fort part of it got burned down.
Yeah, it's not there
a bunch of times.
The grounds are there, and
the exhibits are cool.
Yeah, there's some stuff there to
I've seen some reenactment
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
My mom
yeah,
worked in
yeah.
museums, so like I've participated in some like small museum projects and stuff at Fort Mose. It's fascinating place. I brought my daughter there. Like,
by the way, I should have been home already, but because your mom, I'm still here.
Yeah. Hey, Mom.
You really fucked us today, Mom. You really fucked us.
Yeah.
We still love you, but
if anyone's been following the saga of Riley's mom on the podcast, as I've mentioned her pretty much every episode.
No one's following it more closely than your mom.
Yeah, she's listening. She's listening. I had to take her out to like an hour away to this like aviary rescue for like birds and parrots and shit. And
okay, so according to the story that Riley told me, so Mom, you can, I'm willing to listen to your side. Riley was going to take Mom out there to look at an apartment.
Well, it's a living situation out there. She'll be working and living at the sanctuary,
right? Which then turned into a job interview, or at least an initial training or something.
That's what it turned out to be when I got her out there.
So we were supposed to start at like noon today, and instead Riley showed his happy ass up at the studio at like 4:30.
Well, at noon, I was parked on the side of a rural freeway, just dicking around on my phone because I had to sit there for 5 hours. While
not responding. I assumed because producer Drew and I.
Let's cut this whole thing about my mom, okay? Because she was already like, "Well, you didn't call me a crazy old bitch or something,
Well, then do it now.
And I was like, "Mom, I never call you a crazy old bitch. I call you a cranky old bitch."
Yeah,
okay.
There you go.
Proving
there you go, Mom.
You're proving that right now, Mom.
Producer Drew and I were talking back and forth in our group chat, and Riley wasn't saying anything for hours, and I was like, he's just silently fuming. He's just sitting there waiting on Mom. I was
anticipating a quick back and forth, and it ended up taking about 6 hours.
Anyhow,
I love you, Mom. So anyway, they did Fort Mose. The original fort was described as an earthen-walled fort with Indian-type thatched huts. The community housed 38 men and their families with an estimated population of about 100 people. The men were required to serve in the militia, and they'd be called on to defend St. Augustine if it was ever attacked.
And they have like a miniature recreation of what it looked like at the
They have like a historically accurate
the Fort Mose grounds.
And then if you go to the grounds, they've got like markers and sites where it's like, this is where the walls would be, but the trees have grown in those areas.
It's been like 20 years since I've been out there.
It's pretty cool. They did a revamp about 10 years ago, actually, because it was 20 years ago. It was kind of run down. It was like it was an older like Florida museum, but St. Augustine's seen such like a boom in the past like 20 years. Like it went when I moved here 20 years ago. It was kind of a small historical town, and now it's a way bigger, more industrialized kind of like tourist attraction town.
Fucking Yankees keep coming, man.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
Yeah, I know.
But I really just came down here because I wanted to escape.
The snow?
No, whatever. Anything that I was living before.
The Detroit?
Yeah, the Detroit. Just wanted to escape. So,
much like a slave.
So yeah, but you know, much like a slave, yes. But
Much like
I
a
did the
slave.
reverse. I followed the Southern Cross as far as I could go.
Yeah, you came to Spanish territory in Florida.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now you only have to work for free for. Nah, I don't have a joke.
This podcast is indentured servitude.
It feels like it some days.
Working for Patrick. So
Yeah, but my bottom line looks like shit.
So when British forces from Georgia attacked St. Augustine in 1740, Governor Montiano ordered the people of Moselle to abandon their settlement and fall back to St. Augustine for safety. Fort Moselle was captured by the British and used as a base of operations.
Cunts.
Bunch of cunts. Rawr.
Fucking cunts.
A lot of the that's the first like freed slave colony that's a big portion of the opening of like, I guess you could call it the first like runaway settlements.
Right.
And this is just the first ripple of we can get the fuck out of here if we try.
This is
you know?
these are among the first. So the Negro Fort and Fort Moselle are among the first where you have large colonies almost entirely comprised of freed slaves rather than freed slaves getting into an area and sort of integrating.
Yeah, and going into the 1700s, this is a great example of how like tensions around the world are starting to build up. You know, between England and France, England and Spain, England and everyone really. Like things are not going well in terms of like fucking ambassadorship. You know, what's that called? You know, the thing where you're cool with a different country. What do you call
Global
that?
relations,
Global relations. There's another word for it.
international relations,
No, relation. You keep saying relations. It's different.
diplomacy.
Diplomacy.
Okay.
Not doing so hot at this particular time. You know, in the Caribbean, you got fucking pirates and privateers fucking just fighting everywhere. Just death, blood.
Some of them actually bankrolled by the countries themselves.
I mean, you got the
French pirates are like,
further north, you've got the
just take out some fucking English ships, thanks.
Further north, you got the French and Indian Wars kicking. You know, or the French are allying with native tribes out, you know, running from Michigan into Canada,
Right.
and northern areas
to beat off the English.
Yeah, to beat them off real hard until they don't come, they go. So there's a lot of conflict going on, and European relations are not fucking doing very hot at all. Along with all of this, there's a huge element of the world that we haven't mentioned yet, which is the Native Americans.
Yeah.
Right. So in the like early 18th century,
Well, they're sort of simultaneously being fucked.
Yeah, of course, and that's what I'm
different
saying.
ways.
So in the early 18th century, there were a number of tribes that would like help slaves escape, or they would have.
It's like if you go to a sex shop. Oh no, that's Patreon. My bad. Never mind.
There were a
was a
number.
joke.
There were a number of tribes that would like help fugitive slaves escape, or they would integrate them in their own tribes. But there were also the 5 civilized tribes.
Yeah. Well, the Seminole were pretty big about, at least initially, letting freed slaves join.
Well, there were. How do I say this? Many iterations of the Seminoles.
Sure.
You know, because as we've discussed in previous episodes, the Seminoles were an amalgamation.
Big tribe, lots of smaller factions.
Yeah, big tribe, lots
making
of,
up- yeah.
and really just kind of like an overall kind of a hodgepodge of different tribes
Sure.
getting together to
Sure.
escape
Sure.
colonial rule, right? So you could be, if you were a fugitive slave trying to make it out of, say, South Carolina, right? You could have an entire wilderness route totally mapped out. You'd not run into a single white person the entire way, but you would be just as worried about running into a native tribe because they could just as easily enslave you
yeah.
or kill you as lead you to freedom or just make you a member of their tribe.
Right.
Like there's no way to know,
Right.
really.
Right.
You know?
It's just which part of the tribe did you run into?
Exactly. It totally depends on
Who
what
in the tribe-
faction, what
Because
group.
there are I can't think of the name right now, but there is a famous freed black slave that became a pretty like pivotal Seminole figure.
I'm trying to recall that as well.
Yeah. But I also know that part of the 5 civilized tribes, the name that the colonialists gave them, was that they could own slaves.
Yeah. That was their civilization.
Yeah. See our westward expansion
Yes.
episodes.
Yeah, listen to all our episodes. We've probably covered most of this.
They'll get there. They'll get there. Don't worry.
But yeah, like so some different tribes that would help slaves escape to Spanish colonies would be the Tuscaroras,
Uh-huh.
the Seminoles,
Okay.
the Wyandotte.
Uh-huh.
I grew up on a Wyandotte Street in Michigan.
Did you
Actually,
really?
Yeah, it was 1212 Wyandotte. That
Interesting.
was my childhood home growing up.
Mine was Grace Street.
Yeah, did the Grace Tribe help anybody?
Mm-mm.
Oh, looks like mine's better. The Potawatomi, the
Okay.
Shawnee, the
You listen. The odds that
Ojibwe, the Odawa, the Iroquois.
you may have pronounced half of these right.
Shawnee?
You probably got that one.
I said Potawatomi. Is that different?
I don't know.
Potawatomi.
Is that correct?
But
I don't know that it's correct, is what I'm saying.
I don't know.
So do your best, is what I'm saying.
Was it Bilba Labingi?
And Mara Labingi.
No.
Mara Labingi.
Mara Labingi.
Yeah. Good friend. Friend of the show.
Anyway, but there are a lot of like slave narratives that were written by freedom seekers after they escaped
Uh-huh.
that like tell this story of like
Sure.
they got out, they were pretty much fucked, they're doing their best to get somewhere, they're gonna die in the woods, and they run into a tribe. They're like, ah, fuck, these guys are gonna kill me, and they feed them and help
And then
them
they
get
end
to
up
Florida.
being
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
There's like a hundreds of stories like this all over the place. But then there are also, again, in the context of the way we're describing this, there were plenty of tribes that would capture them and return them to their slave owners for profit, or just kill them.
Right.
You know?
Or feed them and go, hey, now you're our slave.
Yeah, now you're exactly. You're just our slave now. Yeah. It's more fun. We're
Jesus.
cool. We're cool. Come on.
We're also under the thumb of British rule, but you got to get yours where you can.
You know, what are we gonna do? We're gonna skin our
God.
own bucks. Come on.
Fuck me. You know what? I will say, and I don't want to say, but I'm going to say it. In terms of who to be a slave for, I feel like the native tribes were not part of the rat race of industrialization, and therefore you're not.
That's true, but again,
Slavery sucks. Not having your freedom, not having autonomy to make your own decision across the board,
yeah,
with zero fucking contingencies, sucks. Absolute dicks.
I want to.
I feel like you'd have a little bit more.
So hard to do contextually.
You'd have a little bit more humanity being a slave in a native tribe than
Sometimes, yeah,
on a plantation.
but like you have to remember that.
And Shades of Grey is still in effect.
You have to remember that there were
51 now. We're at 51 Shades of Grey.
That's 50 shades darker. if you got,
I don't know. I don't know if anything I just said was accurate. I'm
kind of sort of yes.
I'm
because
riffing here.
I mean, like we talked previously about like how you'd have these enlightened tribes that would be essentially about kindness and the spirit and like helping one another.
Yeah,
and then you have other ones
chucking a spear in your.
They would just like
back.
fuck you up because they were angry or they'd been attacked previously, or there was like a cultural motif that they just did. And some of the tortures that people were put through by native tribes are some of the most horrific you'll ever hear of.
How many native lands had maybe some people attack them that included some slaves?
Yeah,
in
exactly.
The mix.
I mean, if you
so
command
if you're looking
your
at white
slaves
people
to
and
attack
black
and
people
kill
coming at me,
like, yeah.
If I'm looking at white people and black people coming at me and killing fucking braves and killing maybe women and children and things of that nature,
to this.
right?
Like,
then when I see a black person or a white person, I'm like, enemy.
Here's a hypothetical. Okay, say you're a black man that's escaped from a plantation. You're in South Carolina, say, and you're making your way through a swampy area, and you come across two just native children that are fishing.
Sure,
right? They see you, and you see them, right? What I kind of want everyone to consider is that like the intensity of the pressure and the drama on this could lead to any conclusion. You could say, hey, just be quiet and leave, and maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't, or maybe you'd kill those children, or maybe like maybe everything would go according, or maybe the kids would lead you to a tribe and they would like take you somewhere. Like there's no knowing which way that direction would go because there's so many factors to it.
There's a lot of tension.
There's a lot of tension. So much tension. And those kids even would be like, is this guy going to kill us? Like fucking
For sure.
There's so much to like a contextualized meeting like that.
You're looking at two, at this point, for a very long time, marginalized groups of people
Get driven to desperation
who at this point, anybody who's outside of the bubble is potentially, could
100%.
lead to horrific things happening to me and everyone I love.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get it. I
If
get
you,
it.
if you're,
It's not hard to demonize when you are subjugated to that level. And I'm talking about as a Native American or as an African American slave in this country at the time. When you are subjugated to that level, I feel like it's not crazy to think that a lot of those people would look at anybody who's not part of, me, my for lack of better words, my tribe,
Yeah.
right, as potential danger,
I mean,
life-ending
dude,
danger.
look at the way that the world is right now. Like it would take a gas shortage essentially for 80% of the people in this country to shack up with a shotgun and just be like, nobody come near me. Like that's that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
That's like we're not in the middle of like a continuously war torn and contentious like area.
Right.
I was gonna say something else. Kind of forgot.
That's okay.
Yeah. So here's
We'll find
something.
it.
Here's something to note. At this time, the majority of European settlers were living in like colonial towns and cities. The popular narratives that the first slaves in the Americas were natives, and that's definitely true.
Uh-huh.
Like in Spanish colonies in South America, especially the first people that were enslaved in the country.
Absolutely.
Where I mean, like everyone, or at least should know that. Look it up, Columbus. Google it.
We already talked about how many Arawaks, well, not how many, but how the Arawaks were largely enslaved.
Oh, I was going to say,
made to work.
It's very likely that if you were a slave in the South dealing with Native Americans, that the slave owners would tell you horror stories of the natives so that you wouldn't like run to them to try and escape. Of like particularly horrific tortures.
Right.
My favorite story of like horrific tortures is I can't remember what tribe it is, but like the legend is that they would cut slits in your back and hang you by wooden hooks from a tree, and they pull out the muscles of your back muscle and just like hook you and just leave you there. I like that one.
Huh.
Yeah, so I mean, like, you hear shit like that, and then you're trying to escape, and you run into natives. Yeah. Anyway,
John Edward
sorry.
Robinson would have really enjoyed doing that.
Yeah, he would have loved that shit. Anyway,
Throwback to a whole week ago.
yeah. So look up Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
That's in South America. That's all very well documented because, I mean, Columbus kept really good notes. You can read a lot of that kind of shit.
Not good.
Well,
Not good
the things he did were very bad, yes. But the approach that he took in recording those terrible things was very much like an explorer.
Mm-hmm.
So every day he kept a serious log, everything that was expended, everyone that was captured, everyone he killed, every interaction. It was like the same way that Julius Caesar logged his shit when he did like the wars throughout like
By the way,
the Germanics.
Columbus, such a piece of shit that he didn't only kill natives, he frequently tortured and killed his own people.
Yeah, bad guy.
He was a real piece of shit.
Real
Anybody
piece of
who really didn't
Stupid
just
floppy
do what
ass
he
hat,
wanted,
buckle shoe, fuck wears a dress. What a bitch.
Anybody who really just didn't do what he wanted was, and he was. I mean, he was an absolute fucking tyrant as a governor of Puerto Rico or whatever the fuck they called it.
Fuck
at the
that
time.
guy.
Yeah.
So, in North America, the line where natives started being enslaved is a little more blurry than in South America. It's really blurry. It's like unrecorded, essentially, where like the definitive, like, bam, now we're fucking, these are our slaves.
Where the ship started.
Right? History's hard to keep an accurate depiction of in the best of times. And in this already messy, controversial beginning of colonialism in Eastern North America.
I thought we knew what the first slave ship was.
The first slave ship, yes.
Okay.
That would be the one bringing the slave.
Right. And we don't know where it went either. Because,
exactly.
Not a very proud part of my heritage is that there were as many, if not maybe more, slaves brought to Brazil as to the United States of America.
Yeah, you're the problem.
Well, I think initially it was more to Brazil, but then U.S. ended up catching up because Brazil abolished it earlier. But either way, it's, yeah.
I've got my lineage as I learn more about it. It seems very much that like white people in America that can like trace their roots back to like colonial America, like mine can. Like I've got a very strong roots in like New England, Maine, Massachusetts. But there's also a side of my family that comes from the South. Like my grandmother was from Memphis, and she's got like fucking shit all through that, right? But even researching my own history, it's hard to lock in like slave owner. Can you lock that in somewhere? Can I find that? Because white people in America are like, no, nah, dog, not me.
Wasn't
It wasn't me. Wasn't me. It wasn't my great grandfather. Nope, wasn't us.
See, I'm glad I don't even
Their
have to worry
neighbors.
about that.
Their neighbors
Yeah.
had the slaves.
I'm glad I don't have to worry about that. My family didn't end up being here until the 1900s, early 1900s.
Every baby is a fresh start.
That's where we that's where we ended up here.
But I'll tell you this.
from other places.
If I'd been there,
If
it
I
would have gone different. Would have gone a little different. Would have gone a different story.
Wicked fucking different.
Wicked. No slavery. Stop the whole thing.
I would have been like, "Hey, slave owner, fuck you."
Chattel, chat my ass.
Ladies and gentlemen, Marky Mark as a slave.
Whip me one more time.
I'm gonna fucking. I got a whole fucking funky bunch.
Fuck.
Whip me one more time. That seems more like Britney Spears as a slave.
Whip me, baby, one more time. That's what's the third? What's the third of the 50 Shades books?
52 Shades of Grey. 50 Shades Darker.
Oh yeah, 50 Shades Freed. That's it.
50 Shades Freed.
Don't ask me how I know that.
You saw the movies.
I did not.
You have the books.
You had that real
I'm
fast.
a big Twilight fan fiction.
That was
Stan.
a very fast answer on that one.
I'm cutting this part out.
Like that.
Okay. All right, but picture this. All right.
Okay.
When the Spanish first came to Florida, they had to be very cordial. Like they didn't come in right away, dick swinging. Like in when they landed in Brazil, it was like, hey, look at our guns. Fuck
No,
you.
it was the
you know?
Portuguese.
Or the Portuguese when they first landed, it was like, we're the tough guys. Give us your shit, right? But when the Spanish landed in Florida, it was pretty much right off the bat like, hey guys, hey, you look like looks like a nice place you got here. You mind if we have some of your magic youth water? You know, let's have dinner. You know, like like they didn't come in right away dick swinging. The first explorers in Florida were in small groups. They were usually diplomatic, and they'd start by meeting the natives, like Ponce de Leon did with the Timucua in St. Augustine and Jacksonville.
And they had a Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we mentioned in our Thanksgiving episode that the first recorded air quotes, recorded Thanksgiving dinner would have taken place here. So it would be something closer to like first establishing contact, diplomacy, settling, building up a settlement with like the help of the natives, and then bit by bit,
boom, you're our property.
Yeah, more and more ships and colonists and soldiers and weapons would show up. Then they'd bring in African slaves or natives from South America and Mexico. And by the time the natives figure out, oh shit, these slaves look like us, it'd be too late. And they might not be outnumbered because the Timucua in this area, there were hundreds of thousands of them.
Yeah, there's no way they were ever outnumbered.
Yeah,
they were
insane.
outgunned.
Yeah, they were heavily outgunned. The sort of false sense of security of like, yeah, no, like they're the slaves, but we're not. Like we're cool. It might be added to by like the Spanish gifting the tribe slaves. Right? It like normalized the idea, and then bit by bit, the native tribes find themselves working a little harder or trading for a little bit less, and eventually just, you know, hey, now you just give us your shit and do what we say.
God.
You know, it was common for a tribesman or a tribe member to break some law in a colony, intentionally or unintentionally, and the colonists would take the opportunity to take them into indentured servitude. That happened all the time. It's like what happened with fucking Red Cloud and Charging Bear,
Conquering
Bear, and was it Big Forehead?
High Forehead.
High Forehead. So it was like that sort of thing where it's like, yeah, there might be some slight that you come across, and then the governing body would be like, hey, that's going to be $50 or your life.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. Well, it was turn him over first, and then it was
and
then Conquering Bear said, here, have one of our cows.
Yeah.
All yours.
Yeah.
And they said, no, we want $25.
Yeah, so that's a story that would get repeated in smaller scale again and again, all over the place, and especially through the Spanish colonies, and then, you know, working its way into the British colonies as well.
Jesus.
Yeah, and it's just kind of the way it goes, man. Happened up the coast with a bunch of tribes. You know, the 5 civilized tribes.
Yeah.
You know, they adopted slavery under colonialism, and that expanded their definition of that kind of slavery too. So
you have to wonder how much did they fall into that as a means to get better treatment from the, because now this land is owned by a country that's thousands of miles away.
Yeah.
Now it's owned and governed here, right up the street. And, especially after the signing of the Louisiana Purchase, now it's even bigger. Now there's fewer places for us to escape to. How much of that was just in an attempt to get some sort of better treatment from the powers that
we're
be?
playing ball here.
Yeah, look.
You do this slavery thing, we do this slavery thing.
You can take
we're
our
just like
you can take our kids to
we'll
Christian
use
school.
The guns, we'll ride the horses, just fucking
Yeah,
you could exactly, and but so much of this form of indentured servitude would come in the guise of civilizing the savage.
Yeah,
I mean they'd start the re-education schools,
right,
and be like, give us your children.
Yeah,
and then
here, take Crooked Knee, and now he's going to come back as fucking
teach him English.
Alex.
And shit. You're going to teach him English, and then you take away any of their previous culture, and you're going to teach them how to fucking
how to read and write in English, and they don't know fucking shit about
specifically
our language.
Farm and work for us. Now,
right.
Now, good luck surviving out there. Yeah.
Society.
Good luck surviving back in your tribe. You don't know shit about being an Indian. Right. Now you're
not going to get any of these nice clothes.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
A wheel to push down the street with a stick.
Yeah,
you're not going to get that.
These days, we take away your smartphone if you went back to your people. No TikTok.
Oh, fuck.
But a lot of this history is lost. Natives didn't keep particularly good records.
Sure.
In that respect, it was mostly a storytelling,
oral history,
and at the same time, everyone's always known that slavery is fucked up. It's never been a secret from ancient Egypt. Before that, even everyone has always known that making people your slaves is bad.
100%.
Yeah, it's it's common.
Before
it's
the New World was even discovered, it was
all that
very
shit,
well known, very well documented.
Drapetomania that we talked about.
Samuel,
what's his name? Fuck that guy.
Samuel something.
But Drapetomania, they're there's an illness amongst the slaves that they want to escape for some reason. It must be some sort of a brain problem.
Yeah, there's just some sort of physiological problem in their brains.
That person that wrote that knew that he was full of shit when he fucking wrote it.
So
it's never been a question.
And by the way, there are two cures. One is to treat them a little nicer.
The other
Two is that if they keep doing that, you beat them and cut off parts of them.
Yeah, that's
But it's way to cast a wide net, I guess.
There's the hypocrisy of that sort of thinking, because at the same time, we talk about when
none of the solutions were, maybe give them some freedom to make their own choices in life.
When a free slave helped a fugitive slave escape, the punishment, slavery, right? That's, they know that it's bad.
Yeah, that's you're putting it right there on the front page.
Right fucking there.
Right on the front page, baby.
But and
what's the worst punishment we can think of? Now you're one of these guys.
It's so fucked. So
fucking Jesus.
Yeah, by the time settlers had a strong foothold in North America, like the 1690, 1700.
Yeah. Well, by the way, we have talked about this person at length. I don't know that we've specifically mentioned this, but Thomas Jefferson, slave rapist, famously in his writings at the same time that he was writing, the Bill of Rights, saying that all men are created equal, at the same time had writings talking about how slavery maybe not so good. What did he have out back? A whole bunch of fucking slaves.
I mean, out back, Thomas Jefferson had a specific...
Out back, out front, in his bedroom,
Thomas Jefferson
in the
had
basement.
a specific room in Monticello with which to rape slaves. That was that was his shit. He had this is my I fuck slaves room. He had a different one he shared with his wife, and then he felt a little horny at noon on a Wednesday and be like, hey, get in the slave fuck room.
What was Jefferson's wife's name?
I can't remember.
Matilda or something. I feel like they're all named Matilda. Wasn't that
Tiffany Jefferson? Bethany.
You put the 80s names? Are you going with 80s names?
Oh, Tiffany's been around since medieval times, actually.
Debbie?
Fun fact. Martha Jefferson.
Okay. So Martha Jefferson, do you think she knew what was going on?
Yeah.
Like Nancy Joe?
Hey, fun fact. We were talking about the delectable Negro and homoeroticism attached to...
Sadly, we were, yes.
there's also a massive culture of women fucking slaves.
Oh yeah,
Women
yeah,
slave
yeah.
owners used male slaves as sex toys, dating back hundreds and thousands of years.
For sure.
Like, yeah,
For
it's like
sure.
super common. I wouldn't be surprised to know that Jefferson's wife
that
wasn't near
Martha
that.
was getting in on the action.
I mean, like,
Slave room's tomorrow. Slave room's mine tomorrow, Tom.
yeah. Hey, marriage is a partnership.
I'm bringing that big field hand in, and his brother. Jesus Christ!
So the time settlers had a strong foothold
This
in
is
North
the worst
America.
day of my life.
Yeah, that sucks a big fat sack of hairy dicks. But so like by the time settlers had a foothold in North America, slavery had a huge presence, and a large number of slaves were Native Americans. But even the term slave in these cases could be bent. So what we would call slaves might be referred to as prisoners or servants or even like employees. You could get some small pittance of a wage and still have it be called
And so
like,
slave was just like a catch-all term?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so like
It's my slave.
that's my slave. Yes. But you wouldn't. I mean, a lot of these cases,
I pay him 3 pence a week.
in a lot of these cases, you wouldn't refer to the people doing labor as a slave. You would refer to them as an employee or a servant or a worker or a laborer. But
That seems to have changed as time
that
went on.
it did as chattel slavery became more and more like coming out of the Caribbean. Like that became more of like an industrialized process. But at the time, I'd have. I've got
went
my
from speaking like this to speaking like this.
yeah, exactly. So previously, but yes,
That's
I have
my field
I've-
full of
I
slaves.
have 5 workers on my establishment, and I pay them a pittance, but then, of course, they have to recoup expenses, room and board, what have you, so I get it back in turn.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Like, they'd be like, okay, they're workers, but they're fucking slaves. They're
Yeah.
slaves.
Yeah.
They can never escape. And if they escape, they owe you money. So a lot of this history,
By the way, just FYI, indentured servitude was almost akin to slavery during these times.
but with more teeth.
But what?
Indentured?
God.
Waka waka.
Insofar as you would sign a contract to work for someone for X amount of time in order to get here, in most cases, to get from Europe to the U.S.
Yeah, we haven't even talked
And-
about like the idea that like the Irish prisoners
Right,
were
right.
shipped over here, that prisoners from different countries would
And,
be shipped in
and
as,
the way
as
they'd
brute
keep
labor.
you, the way they'd keep you as essentially a slave was, say you have to come over here and work for 5 years. Well, then they would go, oh, well, how are you going to pay for your room and board? How are you going to pay for, how are you going to pay for me feeding you? How are you going to pay for all this? Because you were you're dedicating 5 years to working for free.
Well, it's pretty well documented,
So,
especially in like Canada and stuff like that. That like very often there would be like say like a woman pickpocket in England, would be like, we're gonna fucking hang you in England, and then she'd like bang a guard so that she'd get pregnant because they couldn't execute a pregnant woman, and then they'd ship her off to the New World,
Right.
and like the only currency she had would be to like fuck somebody,
Right.
So she'd be an indentured servant / concubine.
The point is, indentured servitude was not a far cry from slavery. It was better in a lot of ways, but the thing is, and again, you see it time and time again in history, is that the people who already have their fucking thumb on
the ass of
up the ass
history.
of basically everyone else, those people figure out ways to keep you under their thumb.
Yeah.
When you're already there, they figure out very cutesy, innovative
shout out
fucking
Karl
ways.
Marx, Das Kapital, Volume 1.
Yes. And so not to say, because I don't want anybody getting upset and going, oh, you said indentured servitude and slavery were the same things. They weren't. Most of the time, indentured servants came here willingly, or as penance for some sort of crime. What I'm saying is that the people who were in control of those people very much looked at them like slaves and very much figured out ways to keep them in their service indefinitely, much like a slave. That's what I'm saying.
Very well put, Patrick.
Thank you.
So a lot of the history for all this kind of stuff is lost. One, just because keeping records at this time is a very muddy country. Very muddy, wet, dirty country. There's not
Slippy,
slippy, slimy, stinky,
stinky.
just goopy. sticky, tacky,
Gloppy.
itchy country, and and
Clinky.
fucking keeping records for shit like this. Nobody cared. Nobody gave a fuck. Nobody's gonna. So like in the case of pretty much any military conquest, the artifacts of the previous,
Which is crazy because, like, if you think about European history, and there are so many things that are documented going so far back, so much further back than this place was even
it's
known to Europeans.
It's not crazy. It's not crazy. Think about it like this: in say like the Romans,
It was deliberate.
huh?
That was deliberate.
That was deliberate.
That was deliberate.
Is that a Braveheart reference you're just making?
No, that was a Lord of the Rings.
Oh yes, fuck. That was deliberate. Okay. No, but like
When Legolas takes one of Gimli's kills
in a
when they're
huge
counting
portion
orcs.
of, if you think of like where,
We can't go a single episode without a Lord of the Rings.
no, because Lord of the Rings fucking rules.
Fuck yeah.
So it's so good. It's so goddamn good.
That was deliberate.
I want to do an episode in the future about historiography, which is the study of
History.
and how it's formed, right? And one of my little pet things is the Roman colonization of Europe. I think it's. I can't
Spoiler
go.
alert, guys. We're gonna do an episode on the history of history.
Yeah, that's gonna be cool. That's gonna be good. It's gonna be fucking interesting. That's gonna be
so fucking meta, bro.
It's gonna be bizarre.
It's gonna be like Inception.
Just wait for my intro. It's gonna be weird.
Can we put the Inception music in it?
100%. Boom. We're gonna Hans Zimmer this bitch.
Yeah.
But the thinking about like when Caesar swept through Europe, right?
Yep.
The only records of that are the records that he kept.
Well, yeah, history is written by the victors.
Exactly. But like more than that, he was conquering fucking tribes and like Celts and Picts that just like, people, the Germanic tribes that did not fucking write shit. Like they didn't have that. So that history is only contained in the Roman version. And you have to, talk some perspective, like, because we've talked about before, like he'd usually write.
Who's got written histories back then?
Yeah. Like Caesar's thing would be like, whatever senator's son or whatever was in his troop would be like, oh yes, Bojankitis really saved the day. Fucking Botanicus. Botanicus and Bojankitis.
Also, you have to consider it even, going back far enough, there were a lot of civilizations who now, how many people can read hieroglyphics? How many people can read Aramaic?
Yeah, exactly.
How many people can read Sumerian, Assyrian? There's a lot of things where there were written histories, and you can kind of go, oh, this kind of looks like this, and this is a thing. I think it's this.
In Europe, especially through like medieval times and getting into like more established parts of history with like castles and shit like that, like you'd have entire dedicated groups of like monks in monasteries that would be recording history and then saving those books and putting them in a special place and fighting to protect them and shit.
Big library.
Yeah, in the American colonies, you're essentially just trying to fucking survive for the most part. Like we're not really getting good records of shit.
My house is made of sticks.
Exactly.
That's what's going on over here.
It's wet. The bugs are eating my notebook. So like it wasn't until
the horseflies done took away my wife.
It wasn't until you got like
Matilda
photographs essentially and shit like that, and the printing press and things like that you really got the ability to contain this history. So like
my son Bocephus Jr. died of malaria.
I just realized that when I said that one of those Roman kids was Botanicus, that's the name of the wise Bojankitis and Botanicus. Botanicus is the wise E.T. character from E.T. the Ride at Universal Studios.
Oh,
he's like, you must save E.T. Yes, I am Botanicus. Anyway,
it's a weird name for an extraterrestrial.
That whole ride's fucking bizarre.
Does it still exist?
Yeah, it's really close. It was the oldest ride. It's the oldest ride at Universal.
I haven't been there.
It's fucking amazing. Anyway, for fuck's sake, pretty much in the case of any military conquest, artifacts of the previous ruling party are usually destroyed. We're talking about buildings and forts, documents. Yeah. Most retreating militaries have a scorched earth policy.
True.
Whatever documents they can't take with them, they burn. It stands to reason that after the British left the colonies, that like ledgers of various slavery figures became pretty useless and they'd rot or get tossed or burned. And in Florida, the Spanish and the British exchanged ownership several times.
Yeah.
And each time the force leaving would burn everything.
Yeah.
There's documentation in St. Augustine of the Spanish literally taking the iron nails out of the houses before they burned them and taking them with them.
That's right.
So a massive portion of the history here is lost. What we do know is that after the American Revolution, things changed a lot. Like a lot. For one, I've actually got a fucking pretty cool list of the way
now
that
we are a
slavery.
nation.
Now that we are a nation,
We must keep records of things.
We must keep slaves. We must keep with the slavery. It's a tradition, and don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. No one even think about it. Don't worry about it. It's not a problem. I'm not worried about any of this.
However, we shall write their names that we make up for them in books and keep those books in libraries.
All right, so for one, England...
Forever!
For one thing...
This is what you do to me.
I know. I have such a headache. For one, England held on to Canada. So England...
Now.
England held on to Canada for now, and with Spain giving freedom to slaves that would convert to Catholicism in the South, and England granting freedom to slaves that would cross into the Canadian border just to kind of say fuck you to the United States. Yeah, and the French still...
That is so fucking petty.
It's so British.
That's so fucking petty. Like we allowed slaves, but now these colonists have revolted.
You obviously mistreated them.
Yes,
so I suppose
if your slaves come
I'll take on the burden.
into the lands owned by the crown, they shall be free citizens.
And a couple of hundred years after that, it's
They
like,
can all
hey, come
go-
on over, eh?
They can all go to British Columbia, which
Have
is
them Olsons.
identical to South American Columbia, which is why we named it British Columbia.
All right, let's shut the fuck up. So, okay.
Same place, basically.
So they give freedom to say fuck you to the United States. The French was still holding Louisiana territories.
Different type of snow.
And France is still like, hey, fuck you to the U.S. as well. So there were a lot more avenues for escape, right? So like we were talking about that globe going forward, right? So now you got the ocean in front of you, and you've got exits to the rear and both sides.
Sure.
You know?
Got you.
Right? And the United States lost a huge portion of trade with the European-owned Caribbean. Like once we became the United States,
Right, freedom.
like the British colonies in the Caribbean cut off all trade for one. The English privateers put an embargo on the coast, attacking any French or Spanish ships that attempted to trade with the coastal U.S. The U.S. had fucking no navy to speak of, so there was pretty much dick they could do to stop stop that. Beyond hiring privateers and free agents, or as they're now known, pirates. So while pirates were ravaging,
we were getting some help from the French, but
for a little bit,
it was a big thing. Like everybody knew that, and so England's going. England, who by the way, at this point is at war with France, is going
master
like,
and commander on far side of the world.
Is going
Oceans
like
are now battlefields.
anytime. Jesus Christ. Anytime that they get an opportunity to sink a French ship at all is a bonus, and if they're going to the New World, then fuck yeah. So which, by the way, was a large driver of westward expansion because there's all this land. There's a bunch of savages in the way, but if we scooch them out of the way, we've got more than enough land to make do on our own. We don't need them.
So while pirates are ravaging the colonies and they're sinking ships and doing pirate shit, that part of the world's like a no-go for the U.S., like staying out of the Caribbean completely.
Right.
Plus, in the 1790s, when Caribbean slave population started revolting, which was spurred by the American Revolution.
Yeah, I don't think there was ever a point in our history where we were building like big galleons and...
No, that's never been it's not really the American way. I mean, like most of we probably have the biggest Navy we've ever had right now.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, the U.S. Navy was not a thing even during World War I.
There's stuff.
World War II is when we really said,
I guess it was
we need a naval presence.
Probably the Spanish-American War. That would probably be our biggest naval engagement, moving out into like Cuba and stuff like that.
Our biggest naval engagement was World War II.
Well, I mean, I'm talking before like steel ships, like we were talking about, just like the colonial navy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's ever been a history. I'm sure that there are places in the U.S. during colonial times that were building large seafaring ships. It's just not a thing we were known for. It was the Dutch too. The Dutch were big.
Although this is interesting. This is interesting to note, actually. A lot of the ships that would be built in the United States were sold to England and France because they were having such massive naval warfare.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So like we're still like, on the outs. We're not cool, but like we got some good shipwrights and we got some
for
good
profit,
docks.
baby.
And yeah, it's like you can still make some money out of that.
There's a lot of Dutch guys here. They know how to build boats.
Exactly.
Don't they?
So
Jesus Christ. The only point in time where we decided we have to have a big naval presence was post Pearl Harbor, World War II. The whole reason the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor was because that was pretty much our entire
That was
naval
pretty much
fleet.
it. Yeah, really fucked
And
us.
if they fucked that up, then they could do whatever the fuck they wanted in the Pacific without the nearest, military power being able to do shit about it.
Right. So
They shanked it.
shanked it hard.
And then didn't think long and hard enough about how fucking diehard the US would be about building a bunch of ships real fucking fast.
All right, we're running out of time. Let me get through this.
All
one,
right, okay. All right.
Okay. So let me just kind of bomb through this real quick because
Okay.
this is leading into this is like at the end of the movie Horizon with Kevin Costner when when like everything gets exciting real quick for a few minutes and like the montage starts to click together and you're like, oh, some shit's happening, and then it goes Horizon 2 coming
No
next
one
summer.
has
It's
seen
like
this movie.
you really got to check it out. Giovanni Ribisi. So the slave revolts in the Caribbean were spurred by the American Revolution, like just the same way that like it's kind of claimed that the French Revolution was partially inspired by the American Revolution.
Sure.
Like it's just fire begets fire, right?
Right.
So the Caribbean's like, oh, so if they can cast off their masters and the British are kind of weakened right now, let's fucking kill the shit out of them.
These things have a way of inspiring others who hear about it.
So not only was the Caribbean slave revolts kind of kicking everyone's ass, British abolitionism was on the rise as well. Like there's a huge outcry by the population of England about slavery. Like it was not fucking cool. Like it was just they were certainly not anti-colonialist for the most part, but like
they abolished England abolished in the early 1800s.
Yeah, slavery was outlawed in England in 1809.
Yeah.
Right. So the United States was responding to the loss of all this this jazz. Guess how they responded to losing all of this trade with the Caribbean and all that kind of stuff.
Who responded? The English?
The United States.
The U.S.?
Yeah. More slaves. So they started growing bigger crops in the more tropical colonies like the Carolinas and Georgia, growing sugarcane, growing cotton, growing grain to supply what they lost in
I'm from
trade.
Louisiana, southern Louisiana, big sugarcane country.
Huge. Yeah, exactly. So it's not that far from the meridian to the Caribbean.
Right.
Florida too. We've got a lot of cane fields, along with citrus and stuff like that.
Right.
So British loyalists continued fucking with the U.S. for like decades after the Revolution. Essentially skirting whatever laws they could, ignoring government rule. Like these loyalists have become some of the first members of what would become the Underground Railroad.
Really?
Yeah, for one, British abolition became a strong force. The English slavery was outlawed in 1809, making Canada an especially viable place for escape. And secret British loyalists helped many fugitive slaves escape.
Okay.
Yeah. The U.S. would just not stop fucking with the natives.
So these are colonists that were already here that were just butthurt that
they didn't want to be a part of this revolution.
They wanted to remain part of England, and then
they're
the
like,
US,
my family's from England. I'm from England. Like,
and then the let's call them rebels during the Revolutionary War won the war, became the United States of America, and then these guys
there's
are still like
plenty of loyalists.
Yeah, I really would have preferred not to do that.
Yeah, toasting to the king in secret.
Okay.
Yes. No.
In pubs and inns all around the newly formed United States.
The U.S. would not stop fucking with the natives, and many of the tribes responded with sort of like punk rock sabotage. Like they do a lot of raids on small towns, rural plantations. Like attacks on isolated farms, and as often as not, they'd take slaves as their own. But on many occasions, they'd simply free the slaves or incorporate them into their tribe. Yeah. And sometimes they just fucking kill everyone.
The U.S. wouldn't stop fucking with them. They're still fucking with the natives.
If the indication today from the news is,
we read something today about
some
fresh
about
fuckery,
some fucking
fresh native fuckery,
some mountain somewhere.
Hey, let's just keep it innocuous. The fresh native fuckery is where we're gonna leave that.
Yeah. On this random day that has nothing to do with anything. So religious abolitionists began to take a foothold in the United States, especially in Quaker communities. Quakers are members of the Religious Society of Friends, which is a Christian group, which is a band name, cool band name. It's a Christian group that originated in England in the 17th century.
Religious Society of Friends?
Religious Society of Friends.
That's not a cool
Sounds
band
like
name.
a fucking grindcore-ass metal band. Yeah, but whatever.
They believe in the God of Oats.
I mean, I know there's a really cool grindcore band
God
called...
of Oats is a cool grindcore band.
God of Oats? There's a cool grindcore band called the Holy Ghost Tabernacle Choir.
Okay.
Those guys fucking rip. And their lead singer designed my logo for the Haunted Pizzeria project that I was working on a few years ago.
Very cool.
Yeah. It's very fucking black metal-y. It's cool.
Yeah,
Did you ever see that shit?
I've seen it. Yeah.
So yeah, so it's a Christian group, the Religious Society of Friends, that originated in England in the 17th century. Quakers believe in direct access to God.
Okay.
Like they believe in direct access, equality, and pacifism, and
Right.
they're known for their role in the abolitionist movement and the women's rights movements.
Right.
So like Quakers, of like the Quaker Oats, we're talking like these guys are essentially Mennonites and Mormons,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Very puritanical, but in like a pacifistic, like almost hippie-esque way,
Right.
right?
How can you have direct access to God if you're not even allowed to practice your religion?
Exactly. Yeah.
In a way.
Quak-
yeah, I could see where that would
Yeah,
offend them.
Quakers believed, and they still do, that every person has direct access to the revelations of God, which are ongoing and can strike at any time. So, like, every person to them has the right to.
Who was the Quaker president? We had a single
Carter?
Quaker president. No.
Is Carter a Quaker?
Jimmy Carter? No, that was we had one Quaker president. Keep going.
So, like, their take on personal freedom to access God is that, like, you know, God can reach down and touch you at any time, right? But it's a lot harder to, like, open your eyes and your heart to his revelations if you are in chains picking cotton, you know? Like, that's
Okay.
kind of their take on the whole thing.
Richard
you're not-
Nixon.
Nixon was a Quaker president?
Nixon was a Quaker.
Oh, fuck
Quaker.
that asshole.
Yeah.
Hoover.
Herbert Hoover.
Barely know her.
Yeah.
Quakers were the first major organized group to publicly denounce slavery in the Americas. Even pre-Revolution, as far back as like 1688, German Quakers protested the enslavement of people in the Pennsylvania colonies. In 1652, Rhode Island made it illegal to bind people for more than 10 years
Okay.
due to Quaker petition. This is like the first real good like slave limitation.
Okay, yeah.
in
So
the
they're
States.
they're chipping away.
They're a
chipping away at
huge
it.
driver
I like it.
in abolition. Like,
Okay.
it really.
Fucking bravo Quakers.
Dude, religious abolitionists were a massive force. We get to John Brown, like there's a whole thing on that side as
Also
well.
Quaker.
Yeah, Mormon,
Was he Mormon?
Yes.
Okay.
but Allied. He wasn't like fucking. You got to be a Mormon to do this, shit,
Right.
right? So, 100 years after that, like that Quaker petition that limited slavery to 10 years in Philadelphia, in 1786, a man named Philip Dalby, a shopkeeper in Alexandria, Virginia, complained about Quakers suing for the freedom of an enslaved man he took on a business trip to Philadelphia. So, like, they did not stop. We're talking about 100 years. They're still just like,
They're
fucking
suing
quit it.
me. Because I own a person.
But yeah,
Fucking idiot. What a piece
Post-revolution,
of shit that guy is.
Post-revolution, religious abolition sentiments grew, and many churches and congregation houses would become like fugitive slave
Yeah.
houses.
I know the Unitarian Church was real big when we get into the actual Underground Railroad.
Yeah, Unitarian Church is where who are the guys from Clerks?
Jay and Silent Bob.
No. The Clerks themselves, Dante and Randall. So Dante
Yeah.
and Randall from Clerks at the beginning of Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. It is commented that they got gay married to each other at a Unitarian church dressed as stormtroopers.
Huh.
So the anti-slavery movement originated during the Age of Enlightenment, and it focused on ending the transatlantic slave trade. In colonial America, a few German Quakers issued the 1688 Germantown Quaker Petition against slavery, which marked the beginning of the American abolitionist movement. Before the Revolutionary War, evangelical colonists were the primary advocates in the opposition to slavery and the slave trade, doing so on the basis of humanitarianism.
Fucking micro machines, man, over here. You got to be real old to understand that reference.
And during the
Micro machines.
Revolutionary era, all states abolished, during Revolution,
Mhm.
all the states abolished international slave trade. All of
Okay.
them, right? Not to say slavery.
During the American
During the American
Revolution.
Revolution, all the states abolished slavery.
From 1776 to 1783.
Yes.
Okay.
It was abolished,
I'm sorry, 1775.
but that's just because they were in a constant battle and they could not accept more slaves because it was impossible to know if you were selling slaves to the British or the American
Or the
Revolutionists, right?
colonists. If memory serves correct.
And that's just the
this
slave
is-
trade. They didn't abolish having slaves.
Right. If memory serves correct, and this is like literally drudged out of the fucking depths of my brain, there was a time well before slavery was abolished in this country where slaves basically stopped coming, like well before. Slaves basically stopped being brought here because there were so many millions of slaves already in this country
You just breed them.
that they just, slaves make more slaves, right?
Exactly.
Fuck me.
Yeah, that's fucked. That's so
Yeah.
fucked. Okay.
And then that baby is my slave. And I owe Jimmy Johnson down the road a fucking favor.
So I guess I'll just give him my slave
I'll
baby.
give him this slave baby.
Yeah,
That belongs to me and not
super
you,
common. The
mother
number
and father of the baby.
the number of white slave owners that would have black children and then sell them is fucking unspeakable. I'm not even trying to graze the atrocities committed on the humans
Yeah.
involved in all this shit, because it's a never-ending well of fucking horror and torment.
It's not a fun thing to think about.
It's the worst. It's
It's-
the dirt fucking worst. We try to ignore it in this country. It's fucking it's madness.
We do, and the reality is that
Hey, everything's better now, right?
it's
Fucking come on.
The reality is it's a black smear in our history, and that's not a pun in any way, shape, or form, but it is a fucking black smear in our history. And the fact that people try to sort of brush it off or say, well, yeah, but that was a long time ago. One, it wasn't that fucking long ago. Two, it was in effect for a lot longer than it has been not in effect. And three,
It's still certainly heavily in the conversation of current day America.
yeah, and three, you gotta you can't turn a blind eye to every part of fucking history that you don't like. That makes you a pussy.
That's
That
why
makes you a
we're
pussy
here.
and a fucking piece of shit. And grow the fuck up, pull your fucking balls out, stretch them over the fucking table if you have to.
That's why
And look this shit in the eye and go, you know what? It happened. It sucks. And now it's time to fucking make amends if I can. Or at least be fucking empathetic to the struggles of people who went through some fucking shit that I didn't have to go through and my fucking ancestors didn't have to go through. That's all.
Which is why us courageous big dick men, white and white passing alike, have offered so gallantly to portray this in a realistic way.
Yeah. It's tough, and there's
Drew's
still
not here.
there's still
He's not
still
even
parts
here
of
to make
this.
that like I'm not here gesture that he
Yeah.
just made.
There are still parts of this.
Stop looking at me.
There's still parts of this that we, as we've been going through it, where, I keep sort of circling back in my brain to, are we the best voices?
Are we the baddies?
Are we the best voices to sort of disseminate this information?
I mean, voice is a voice, man.
And yeah, and I think where I'm going to land on this here at the end of the episode is maybe we're not the best.
Hey, we're just
Maybe we are not even the
we're just
fucking
screaming
fifth.
into the void here. All right,
Maybe-
if you're listening,
yeah.
cool.
Maybe we're not even the 100th best. But I think we've pretty successfully approached this from a place of trying to understand as best we can, and certainly understanding the atrocities as best we can. And yeah, I mean, I don't think we sugarcoated anything.
Yeah, here. Let me. I got like this last page. Let me just wrap it up real quick.
Wrap it up, baby.
Okay. So one more little detail that I think is hugely important because
Okay.
this brings us all the way up to 1776 and just a little bit beyond. Yeah.
Okay.
We're not
so-
covering the American Revolution.
Early
you
Revolution.
Fucking Google it. The American Revolution. Heard of it?
Yeah.
So in 1794,
Mm-hmm.
right, a man named Eli Whitney
Oh, that guy.
patented a little device called the cotton gin.
Sure.
Cotton was a huge export. It grows like
That was in
1794.
Okay.
So a little bit after.
So
right?
we're 11-year-old country at that point.
Yes. We're 11 just a little 11-year-old country.
Yeah.
That's about to have the most insane influx of industrialized slavery the world has ever known.
Right.
Right. So in
Jesus.
1794, Eli Whitney patented the cotton gin. The cotton gin. Cotton is a huge export. It grows like weeds all through the American South. It's
And
resilient.
gin is a botanical spirit flavored with juniper berries.
Cotton is resilient and lightweight. And
So annoyed.
dude, I got like 3 paragraphs left of this bitch. Cotton's a huge export. You wanted me to research this so thoroughly.
You did
You
a
were
really good job.
so
You did a really
nervous.
good job. You did a good job. I was so nervous. God.
Because everybody knows I'm a little stinker. I'm a little prankster,
Yeah.
a little fun guy with
You
my
did good.
jokes.
You did great.
Let me just get this out.
Okay, go
Eli
ahead.
Whitney and the cotton gin. Heard of it?
No, I usually do tonic and gin.
So cotton grows like weeds throughout the American South. It's resilient, it's lightweight, and unfortunately extremely taxing and time-consuming to pick and process. Combing out cotton fibers and picking out seeds was a huge, slow process. until Mr. Whitney's delightful invention, which quickly and easily separated the seeds from the cotton, allowing for either planting more cotton or producing cottonseed oil. This has commonly been attributed to lightening the load of labor on slaves in the South. Just kidding. In actuality, what it did was industrialize it, and lo and behold, sugarcane plantations all over again. Processing the cotton faster, creating a cheaper product, increasing demand, calling for more slaves to pick faster.
Yeah, we need more slaves.
Yeah,
and
and
fields are bigger, and we can
more
plant
slaves. You know, so on and so forth. It's
God.
the exact same industrialization that happened with the sugarcane, just the boom. You know,
faster. So here is the first thing that, not the first, but one of the new facts, one of the big facts that got debunked in my brain from this episode is that I always thought that the cotton gin was the undoing, or at least a large part of the undoing of slavery.
I mean, we can definitely go over how the American education system has pushed false narratives like that.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge fucking
Yeah.
part of. I mean, that's kind of the reason we have this podcast.
Yeah.
Is like we know things about
learned
history
wrong.
that just aren't fucking true. And yeah, it would be. It was put out there that the cotton gin made things easier.
It made
It was a.
yeah,
it was
you
a, it was
didn't
a,
need slaves
It was
anymore
a boon
because
to slaves. Yeah, it helped with abolition.
Uh-huh.
In effect, it made it big. The big slave, like big slavery, happened at this time, right after the American Revolution, because of this fucking machine. You know, like I travel through South Carolina all the time. There are thousands of cotton
acres
fields. Like
and
looking,
acres till as
and
far as the eye can see of cotton.
I mean, really. I mean, I'm sure there's been some variation over the past 150 years, but like these fields have been there the whole fucking time. You know, so
for sure.
So like just picturing how many human beings it would take to pick this shit
Depending
in all
on
these
what
fields is fucking insane.
Depending on which streets you go down, some of those houses have been there the whole
absolutely,
time.
100%. I've worked in some of those houses.
Yeah.
I mean, like last time I was up there, I very literally drove through a massive cotton field with a decaying plantation house, like falling in on itself, like right in the background. And it was chilling. I will say chilling. It was fucking like this shouldn't be the world, you know. But anyway, so almost done here.
Bad
Very
things
close.
happened very close.
So there's
to
a
that.
huge boom in chattel slavery in the American South by 1800, right? And at the same time that that was happening, abolitionist fervor is reaching a huge fever pitch.
Okay.
Looking at the globe, the way that we're moving forward and not side to side, right? Like, so now you've got this little grouping in the South with all this slavery combating all the abolitionist sentiment in the North, which is to the left, remember? Right. And this at the same time is
the industrial
age is spawning, right? And there's conflict in Florida, and there's conflict in Canada, and there's a lot going on.
Right.
This is just a very complicated, fucking weird country at this point.
Right.
So the cotton gin by itself could be attributed as a main cause for the American Civil War, because the influx of slavery, everyone knows that if you put more things in a small area, then your treatment of those things gets worse.
Right.
Whether it's industrialized, like fucking chicken farming, or
and also if you're also a little bit kind of like about a thing, nothing makes you go full blown whoa than just throwing it in your face.
Yeah, exactly. So like, you get more slaves put into the same area that the slaves are already there. They're not really building them better accommodations. The treatment's getting worse. The work is getting harder. If you're a plantation owner and last week it cost you $100 a week to feed all your slaves, but now you got an additional 25 slaves and it's costing you $200 a week to feed the slaves, you're like, fuck that. We'll pay $150.
I think
so everyone's rations are getting cut.
I think it also bears mentioning the people in the North, as industrialization really starts to take off, are also speaking from a place of, this sudden and immediate privilege where, you weren't piping up about it before, but now as industrialization gets bigger, and now there's more railroads and more, I don't know, name a thing. Steel mills.
There's more
travel.
More travel. There's
people
more
coming
education.
as
There's more
tourists.
documentation. There's more literature. There's more newspapers. There's more conversation.
And the North has the bulk of that. So as now you have more and more things that you are able to dissociate from those southern states where the only thing really to make money off of was agriculture.
Right.
And the best way to make a lot of money was to have free labor.
And well, think about it like this
You get
too.
to suddenly speak from a place of, well, that's bad.
Well, we think of like the North being so noble, right? But like
Right. No, not at all.
in reality,
I
we've
don't.
got the more like major ports pulling in immigrants from all over the world at this time, right? And the cities filling up, the agriculture booming in areas around those cities with predominantly white immigrants.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
you listen.
So you didn't need slaves up there because
Yeah.
fucking everyone was broke and they needed jobs so bad.
Look at the treatment of Irish, German, Italian. Those are the three big ones that really just ring a bell in my brain. Of
the
just
dirty
awful.
potato Irish and the filthy eye ties, they needed jobs as well.
But you look at the way that those people were treated traditionally when they came in large waves of migration, and there's never really been, and it's sad to say this out loud, and it's not the first time I've said it out loud, and every time I feel sad about it. The history of this country hasn't really changed much in terms of it being at its heart very xenophobic.
Which is crazy because it's the melting pot, right?
Because and that is the thing, is that anybody who's sitting here going, oh, these people from here and those people from there, whatever, you're not, unless you are a fucking like full-blooded Native American, shut the fuck up. Shut the absolute fuck up, because somewhere down your lineage, not that far ago, somebody was that person coming from there. So just shut the fuck up.
Last point. Okay?
Yes.
1820, after lots of conflict, lots of abolitionary sentiment, differential states' rights arguments, protests, pushes, Quakers pushing for shit.
This is when we have...
In 1820, we have the Missouri Compromise.
Yep. Right? We talked about it.
Yes. The Compromise, it admitted Maine as a free state, right? And Missouri as a slave state at the same time. It was like same time, man, same time.
Right, because you had to have equal balance for legislative powers in Congress.
You had the tradesies. Right? The Compromise drew a line from east to west along the 36th parallel, divided the nation into free and slave states. Right? The Compromise prohibited slavery north of the 36th, and
east of the Mississippi was still the Mason-Dixon. Yes. West of the Mississippi was the what do they call that? The Missouri...
The Missouri Territories?
Missouri... No, the 36, 30... What is it?
52, blue.
The parallel. What was the parallel on it?
The 36th?
30 parallel.
Yeah, 3630. Okay, yeah, I got that right. 3630 latitude line in the Louisiana Territory. So 1820 marks the true official north and south delineation, with states above the 36th parallel abolishing slavery. I've got a picture of that here. So like,
which is funny because Missouri's above the 3630 parallel, right? And then Kansas, with the whole Bleeding Kansas event, that was effectively a precursor to the Civil War, was also, according to the law, supposed to be a free state. And we had that whole Bleeding Kansas event because people were trying to turn it into...
Which we will cover in the next episode.
Oh, really?
We're going to do some Bleeding Kansas there because of John Brown.
Okay.
Yeah, John Brown and the abolitionist movement. Like, so if you look at a map right now...
because they were trying to say, even after the 3630 parallel, they were trying to say, well, the people who live in the state should get to decide. Which... if you have enough rich people, rich industrialists or rich agricultural people in Kansas, you're going to have almost exclusively agricultural people. What do you think they're going to vote for?
So, like, because of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, like 1854, you got a really clear delineation of, like, below Pennsylvania into Virginia, slave. Under Ohio and Kentucky, slavery. Under Indiana, slavery. So like that line is drawn very, very clearly. It's just a super clear, easy north-south. And once you get people grouped into territories like that, things get a little hinky, for sure. But I think we're gonna leave it there for this episode.
Okay.
All right. Not a fun topic, but we're leaving it at possibly the most horrific time in American history, because it's the big boom of chattel slavery, massive conflict, and I'm only lightly skimming the atrocities committed to all these people held prisoner in the antebellum system.
I just want to say that normally when we get together and we record, it's a
laugh riot.
It's a joyful time for me. It makes me sort of forget the things that are stressing me out during my
flowers, week. We hug and kiss.
This episode,
jerk each other off.
This episode has been more anxiety-inducing than almost anything else that's happened to me in the last week.
You know how like conservative comedians are always worried about getting canceled for shit.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Is that how you feel right
I
now?
don't at all think that we'd be canceled for any of this. But like
No, I
as
don't think so.
conscientious people, we're like, we got to toe the line. Like there's got to be a line to toe here. You know,
Well, this is why I don't have any sympathy for those guys. Is that
they can suck a bag of dicks. Like, yeah.
multiple times during this episode, I could have said something real edgy, you know, and been like,
I think
"Whoa,
we
I don't
said
care
some
what
edgy
you think.
shit, like-
I don't care what you think, you stupid libs."
I think we
And I
we
didn't.
managed to be pretty fucking edgy
Yeah.
while still being sympathetic.
You
to,
know what?
like,
You know what I did?
Huh.
I said to myself, "Is that how I want to approach this? Is I don't give a fuck who I offend? No, I would like people to know that I
do unto others.
that I have a tremendous amount of empathy for the people who suffered through this."
I believe I mentioned dirty potato Irish.
Any fucking way.
That's edgy.
It was. You're so brave.
Okay, so the next episode, we'll get into the more heroic, valiant efforts of like the small and dedicated group known as the Underground Railroad.
Okay.
There's some fucking adventure to be had.
Okay.
There is massive amounts of excitement. There are heartbreaking tales. There are exciting tales. Like this is this part was hard, but it is utterly vital to understanding like
Sure.
where we're coming from for this next episode, because the next episode is essentially action packed.
Okay.
Yeah, there's fucking battles. There's fucking just running, and
It's basically the Transporter 5 of Delete Everything podcast.
I would go so far as to say it's like Jackie Chan's Police Story 3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's a lot of adventure, a lot of
Couldn't cover it
excitement.
in the first
and
two.
Here's a cool part. Just spoiler alert: a bunch of slave owners that get their heads cut off by a big crazy fuck with a sword.
John Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like we've been teasing this character. He's fuck. John Brown is cool.
Okay. Well, that being said, are we ready to wrap?
Thank you for tuning in to Delete Everything.
Thanks, guys. If you enjoyed this story, if you enjoyed the way that Riley researched and told it, then the best way to tell us is to get onto whatever you're listening to. Give us 5 stars. Give us a review. If you're on Spotify, leave a comment on the episode. That's going to be, man, that's
Oh,
like...
shit.
What,
Peony Vagini. It's my catchphrase. I got to say it every episode.
that's
Genie.
that's the fucking way to really like stand out in the crowd and show us your support. That's how you do it. If you liked something about the episode, if you hated something about the episode, if you think that we are the worst people to be talking about this and we should shut the fuck up, or if you have show suggestions for the future, deleteeverythingpodcast@gmail.com. That is where you can send us a message and we are going to read it and we're going to say something back to you. And we will probably use a lot of expletives, but maybe we won't. Depends on what you say.
Fuck, shit, butt, poop.
If you want to see some images, some visuals around this episode, then the place to see that is Instagram. We're on there, Delete Everything Podcast. Give us a follow, and you'll every single episode, every Monday when an episode drops, you get to see some stuff from what we talked about. So
Patreon's actually starting to get fun. We're rocking the
Patreon
video.
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
huh?
If you want some bonus content,
Boners content.
If you want to support us even more effectively, that's the only way we make money at this point is if you join our Patreon, and you'll get weekly episodes. They're short episodes. They're a lot more fucking unhinged. Normally, we don't even talk about the topic.
Really
We
fucking
just
free.
go.
The one we just recorded is insane because like
We were supposed
we
to-
started on such a heavy topic and we just talked about dildos. the whole time.
Yeah. So just for a reference, this week's Patreon, which we recorded right before this episode, we were supposed to talk about new science that's coming out to retrain the neural pathways of people suffering from PTSD. They figured out ways of mapping your brain and seeing because memories work in a tricky way where they can take one of literally millions of different neural pathways, and people who suffer from PTSD, every time they think about that thing, those neural pathways sort of light back up and cause them to relive this whole fucking thing. So this new science is basically making it so you can retrain those neural pathways and associate it with something fun like watching your dog jump around in the lake that one summer, right? And you don't forget the memory entirely. It's just not as visceral of a memory.
It was a
when you
fascinating
think about that,
topic.
like, yeah, and
We didn't talk about
what
it at
that-
all.
What that devolved into immediately was stories about going into sex shops and buying toys, and whether girls let each other borrow dildos, and if guys should let each other borrow their sex toys, and why it's okay for girls to have a lot of sex toys, and why it's weird for guys to have sex toys.
Is it racially
And-
ambiguous for you to have a preference in fleshlight based on the color of the
Riley-
the tone color of the
Riley
skin?
has a story where he has a big conundrum about what fleshlight to buy.
You get a double-sided fleshlight. You want mouth vagina or butt vagina or mouth butt.
That
And what
was
does
part
that
of the
say
conundrum.
about you?
Anyway, we thank you for being with us, and we'll be back next week. And until then, we love you. Bye.